So, what was this game about again?
Xenoblade Chronicles, a series of 4 lengthy, girthy video games developed by Monolithsoft, a studio populated by plenty of ex-Square employees. This particular collection sits at the tail end of a greater saga spanning several console generations. You might have played 1 or 2, but few players pulled a hat trick, let alone the round-the-world run. It's a famous name for a reason. They're mechanical, poignant, incredibly intelligent games. Masahiro Sakurai loves them so much that both Xenoblade characters present in Smash are allowed to cheat. Move cost $6.99. You know, I was worried walking into this project covering all 4 games. More worried than usual. It's a massive undertaking, juggling 4 enormous titles in one enormous video, fishing for some cohesive point, a wispy thread to string them together. It's a Patreon vid after all, gotta give it the riz, but it never even occurred to me to cover Xenogears or Xenosaga first. And now, after experiencing every entry, I don't think I should be worried at all. I don't even think the devs would judge me if I got something wrong, if I'm missing the complete picture. Chronicles is itself, and nothing else hits the same. They might be built on a lore book thick enough to kill me, but the real stories of Xenoblade Chronicles happen between characters, not in the endless cosmic strife that underscores the series. I'd go as far as saying that Xenoblade Chronicles resists the need for perfect knowledge at its core. In the end, we're all sitting around the same garbage fire on this earth, talking, sharing, being, and making mistakes, letting things slip through the cracks while we focus on ourselves. 3 years ago, I implied that the lack of rollback netcode in Grand Blue Fantasy Versus wasn't that big of a deal. Yeah, you can say that and still have a career. You can say that and still have a career. Yeah, you can do that and still have a career. When are you going to learn I'm too gamer for that?
Go on, load up another one, idiots!
Xenoblade Chronicles, the game that made me think. Nowadays, you can just pick up the remastered Switch version like I did, and while plenty of things were altered, including the paint job, the aesthetic core of the experience, it means the game's a lot less funny. The characters transform from weird mutant peephole to anime dolls. It might sound strange, but I'm basically 80 years old, and crusty graphics are kinda my jam. I regret not playing the original with its dusty tone look, its withering charm. Things slid from austere to fantastical across versions, and it's kinda jarring. But it's worth remembering that the change wasn't only to keep this early game in line with other entries, but to take advantage of more expressive facial animations that weren't possible with the old models. And with that in mind, I think it's the version that devs want me to play. It's the definitive version. This is what they're hiding from you. This is what they took from us. It's a smoother run, especially getting into Xenoblade Chronicles for the first time. That said, calling the remaster a smoother experience is kind of like chewing a celery stick and hoping it's enough to regulate your bowel movements. No matter which version you play, Wii, Switch, or 3DS, you've got a lot of game to churn through. We intro with a prolonged cutscene to illustrate the main conflict, humans battling with synthetic beings called Mechon. Thankfully, mankind has a special weapon that trounces Mechon, but only one guy can effectively wield it, and it happens to be killing him slowly. He's betrayed by a comrade and wounded before the cutscene wraps. Directly following is an establishing sequence to ground the player in the world. We're introduced to the protag Shulk, his buddy Ryan, childhood friend Fiora, and meet up with the war hero, Fiora's brother, Dunban, the only guy in town strong enough to wield the funny plastic sword. Yeah, you thought it was all about strength, didn't you, Ryan? Well, guess again, dipshit. I really love the intro, enough that I think it deserves its own segment because, yeah, it's the tutorial, and yeah, it's where the world-building foundations are laid, but more than those things, it's also home to some of the strongest foreshadowing and intelligent narrative work I've experienced in a video game. Let me paint a picture. You just watched mankind fight a losing battle with an unstoppable drone army. Then you're dropped into this wistful, pastoral landscape surrounded by the beauty of nature, and you almost get your ass kicked by a hermit crab. you're barely higher on the food chain. Then the game has you walk through a field teeming with monsters more than you would ever bother killing. And while you could, you're probably excited to get playing the game you bought. Naturally, intuitively, the player is guided through this microcosm of a tiny colony's lived reality. Threatened by lethal mechon hunters and thrust deep in a gorge, humankind is cast as animalian, kept human by the small dignities they assert: color, clothing, personality. Through side quests, conversation, and conflict, you embody the hunter-gatherer lifestyle your people so thoroughly understand in-game. You may have a name and an outfit and a job, but in the bigger picture, you're just another organism, a part of the ecosystem. I thought all this during the intro and tweeted about it, which maybe qualifies me for a prescription. Turns out that's the single most important part of Xenoblade Chronicles, and they tell you without telling you in the first 20 minutes. If you haven't played this game before, timestamp this segment real quick and come back after the endgame discussion. Trust me. The whole conceit is also enhanced by the gameplay. It's not a traditional turn-based JRPG, but a real-time MMO-like system, minus the people. Put some quotes around that, and all the direct message harassment. We'll dig in later, but suffice it to say that MMOs tend to be pretty slow, at least compared to your Final Fantasies and Dragon Quests. And Shulk, who many players control for the bulk of the game, has positional attacks, moves enhanced by hitting the side of a foe or landing a backslash! And that means that even if you don't find combat particularly difficult, it can be physically demanding, intentional, emergent, and because it's based in the MMO gameplay lineage, it's slow, often a war of attrition. I don't think I can imagine a more fitting system to sell the narrative conceit Xenoblade Chronicles does. You are not better than these creatures, you just happen to stand upright and pay taxes. Get going, dumbass. It goes even deeper than that simple aesthetic meshing, but again, we'll talk later. The conclusion to this profound intro segment critically allows the player to witness a heart-to-heart moment with Fiora, where she's revealed to be genuinely in love with Shulk. Now, I didn't lose any points here because I can talk to human beings, but I like to think someone screwed up all the answers right before what happens 20 minutes later. This heart-to-heart system is extremely relevant to the experience, a game stuffed with elaborate cutscenes that must have completely devoured the budget. A lot of inter-character moments happen in these ambient character model and text box arrangements, so it's important to pay attention where you can to take in the totality of in-game character development. You might never know, for example, that this stupid critter offers to take Shulk in as a son, freely, if you missed the heart-to-heart. Anyway, mech on attack and you're powerless to stop them. Normal weapons won't work. The town absolutely needs someone to get the Monado and get killing synths. Only, Dunban's still injured and the party gets held up by a lot of crap. Now I'm going to show the inciting incident on screen. It's technically a spoiler, but most people have seen it already and it happens really early, so you're gonna have to give me this one. First of all, amazing scream, bro. Suckering the player in with a 3D girlfriend, giving us just enough to like her, and then making her both a sympathetic badass and a corpse in an intro sequence is a powerful move. Shulk and Ryan set off on a quest to destroy the mechon threat in Fiora's name, and free humankind from the yoke of their perceived oppressors. And that's a bit of a gamble. It implies that watching Fiora die, who we knew for such a dangerously small time, is enough to carry the story until it can catch up to a new motivation. Thankfully, Xenoblade Chronicles does amazing work with cutscenes, curating the fiery verve of each on-screen conflict to sweep players up in a pathos cyclone. It's hard not to be curious about what's coming, and it's partially thanks to the visions. Shulk ends up being the Monado's chosen wielder. The weapon's purpose is revealed over time, but in these early scenes, the characters only know that it can cut through mechon. Shulk eventually realizes the Monado is more than it seems. Fair enough, right? Thing looks like some shit you buy in a Toys R Us. Its utility expands over time, but more importantly, Shulk starts seeing things. Visions of spliced up future cutscenes. You'd think that'd suck the joy out, but a particularly attentive player might realize the visions and how the cutscenes actually play out don't always line up exactly how they should. The first thing you gotta understand about Xenoblade Chronicles is this is a praise king game, okay? Like, every character is gonna shout, "Good job, bud." They're gonna high-five you after anything you do. They're gonna make you feel good about yourself. Apparently, the devs wanted it that way, and, I think that's a little weird, but feel free to write as much sickening praise in the comments as possible. I won't mind. Regardless, you'll eventually hit the open fields, Gar Plain, the perfect zone to illustrate the world, level design, map traversal, everything. You could fit a whole game in this place. While the intro made it clear that humans and animals kind of coexist with each other, your people were squarely on home turf and weren't immediately threatened by the wildlife. Once you're trekking through prairies and climbing mountains, the flora and fauna are a lot more considerable. It's a backdrop, a vibe that carries through every entry, and it kind of brings back vanilla World of Warcraft vibes, you know? Any kind of enemy attacking you could be lethal if you aren't prepared. And that's true here, too. Enormous, level-inappropriate monsters roam freely, unimpeded, unbothered, in their lane, and flourishing. God help you if you don't stay in your own. They're beautiful environments, too, worth taking the time to see. A few, like this plane, are pretty believable spaces caught somewhere between traditional fantasy and dusty western, but many feature fantastical elements, key visual motifs that give an alien life and flair to these spaces, which, again, only reinforce the general WoW vibe. Some fans don't like the MMO comparison, but if you've played more than a week of basically any of them, the inspirations seem obvious. This is a game where a side quest makes you kill animals until you collected enough dropped quest items from a % chance loot table. I liked WoW a lot growing up. Man, that's game design from someone who hates themselves. Contrasting colors, glowing trees, enemy-obscuring foliage, real-time day-night cycles. The world is dangerous and enticing. Admittedly, there isn't much to actually do in the world. You go out and perform combat mostly, but that doesn't diminish the weight of the pathfinding, quest completing, and the danger. To move through the world is to be immersed by the world, as the gameplay systems magnetize the player to the experience. You're rewarded for exploring in a few ways. You get experience for reaching new places, you fill out the world map as you go, you unlock fast travel points in the form of landmarks, and you find heart-to-heart spots the more you search. And that's all sitting quietly alongside the combat, something you'll need to work through in huge quantities. Absolute graveyards of monster corpses until you're ready for the endgame. So, time in the wild is worth every second. Xenoblade Chronicles, and specifically this first entry, does a lot with elevation and space.
And are you supposed to go here? I feel like I'm not supposed to be here, right?
Here you're at the mercy of the environment. If you need to get somewhere, you need to find the way, and nobody's guiding your hand. It's not that the environments are overly complex, but between the monsters littering every inch of every zone and the unique challenges each location poses, it's easy to feel small and vulnerable more often than not, which is absolutely the direction to take considering the narrative thread about humans coexisting in an ecosystem with other life forms. The plot actually revolves around the world, and not just in a JRPG hero saving the world way either. If you've never played, it might be hard to visualize, but the entire game takes place on a pair of ancient monolithic mechs, the Bionis and the Mechanis. Organic, synthetic, eternally opposed. It's an incredible concept, physically scaling an inert titan, cutting through its insides. That little piece of context warps so much of the experience if you take the time to think about it during play. All of this scale, all of this grandeur, and it's not even a fraction of the life inhabiting the Bionis. This setting in particular illustrates the utterly microscopic power your party wields. The Monado, as powerful as it is still a fraction of a grain of rice in a conflict spanning two of these monstrosities. And what does that say about the struggle weighed against the planet these mechs stand on, weighed against the very universe itself? The drama of the story is heavy and pulses with genuine force, but it's entirely contextual, exclusively shared by this loose band of friends trying to change reality. This got way heavier than the cute anime game should have, huh? I shouldn't neglect the Mechanis either. Most of its surface is barren, rife with metallic outposts and filth, but internally, I think it's a feeling similar to seeing Dishonored's Clockwork Mansion for the first time. Such an intricate but grandiose interior. I was listening to King K's video and he mentioned that the Bionis and Mechanis are mirrored, organic, synthetic, etc., even down to their construction, where the Bionis is lively externally and somber inside. The Mechanis is dead on the surface and immaculate internally. It's the kind of thing that should naturally cue the player into appreciating their apparent enemy. It implies that though very fundamental differences exist among both factions, each has value. They just value different things. And you don't even see it until partway through the Mechanis segment. I'm constantly finding myself in awe of Xenoblade's general construction. Now, the size of this bigger picture, this war of nations, is enough to eclipse any kind of player motivation. It's too big to fit into. So the game gives you verbs. Find this person, retrieve this thing, investigate the disturbance, rebuild the town. Genuinely, for all the boring fetch quests and other MMO chaff, you're tasked with rebuilding a town at one point, something that lets the player physically enact change in the world for a handful of NPCs. That's a powerful way to keep players invested in the setting, give them some pride, inspire some heroism on top of the usual JRPG quest rewards. Unfortunately, it's located on the Bionis' What level the town, bro? I don't know, must have been an earthquake, bro. Side quests do have one particular quirk. Sometimes completing a task for one person will get you in trouble with another. Even in a world so obviously desperate for good, people still find the time to be petty, which is either the most realistic way I've seen a game handle NPCs, or it's a broader condemnation of this species. Maybe both. But let's take a look at the cast. The party consists of Shulk, Rhine, Sniper Medic Sharla, eventually Dunban, the Princess Melia Antiqua of the High Entia race, temporary party member Ricky, and Spoiler. These characters each have roles, and it's worth dissecting them a little. Shulk might be a certain kind of character in Smash Bros.
Now it's short time!
But that's not really the complete picture. He starts the game as some kind of gearhead tinkerer. He's thoughtful and even-keeled. Nothing is exuberantly youthful as Smash portrays him. He's a melee DPS character, but also a pretty potent utility anchor. That is, he can handle almost any situation in the game, and his Monado arts make combat significantly more doable. So while you don't need him all of the time, you're kind of led into Shulk regardless. He's constantly watching his friends die in visions, and he's already pretty cerebral. And these traits combined create friction with Ryan until Shulk is able to trust in his friends enough to freely communicate about his visions and powers, enough that they can trust him in return. He doesn't work as a team member, as a person without the trust and company of his friends. That's kind of perfect JRPG protag construction. Finally, the Ortagonist. I think it'd be a short straw conclusion to look at Shulk as battle-hungry or a Genki shonen warrior type. Smash doesn't help that potential character read, but it's fairly accurate to the game, at least at a glance. Shulk is generally upbeat in regular combat, though in cutscenes he's more often strategic and deadly serious. But in those, the stakes are usually life or death. I think the character he takes on in regular combat is great, regardless of what's shown in cutscenes, though, because Shulk is both the Monado's chosen one and the last hope for humanity. After letting his friends in on his visions, he starts to undergo the process of becoming. Self-actualization. He develops purpose and pride and competence. It's a minor detail, but in case it wasn't clear yet, Xenoblade Chronicles games are well constructed in many ways, thoroughly intelligent, not just anime. Ryan is a Mario. He's the raw beef, the tank who takes it on the chin. Guy's a bit of a doof on account of his low int, but we can love a doof. Most of his scenes are tied up with Shulk or Sharla, either smacking sense into vomit sound.wave or chatting up a married woman, a little too casually. That's fine, husband for bread, Rhyme for whatever, I feel you. While he's no good with words, he manages to be the emotional rock multiple characters need over the course of the game. Sharla is the party healer, like almost exclusively focused on healing, enough that most players consider her outright terrible, so many players keep her off the squad. Now, I suck at Xenoblade, so I used her a lot. There is no but. Oops. Sharla's ultimate goal is finding her missing husband, even when it feels like she's walking an impossible road. But she's still a regular person from a neighboring colony caught up in Mechon terror. People have suggested her arc ends early and she has no reason to exist after, but I think there's a quiet strength in searching for a loved one endlessly, with the whole saving the rest of humankind alongside the Monado's wielder underwriting the journey. She lapses pretty effortlessly from resolving one conflict into trudging towards another. Dunban is my personal favorite and unintentionally hilarious. He's a dodge tank, meaning he's supposed to evade enemies while sucking up their attention. A perfect fit for a master swordsman war hero who just lost out on the plastic destiny weapon. But he's funny for a couple reasons. In the original release, he was extremely effective as a dodge tank if left naked. Who would win, 1 trillion robots or a greased-up twerk competition contestant in the same bracket as Dante? Even his default outfit. I mean, this guy is part of a scavenging colony of browbeaten humans, and he still finds time to tie a cravat. I get that it's a visual signifier of refinement or nobility, but a cravat? Unbelievable. Think about who wears a cravat. Either he's secretly an aristocrat, or Scene Dixon's Dixon. Otherwise, he's Shulk's mentor, general, world understander, guide, and diplomat. Melia is a character I didn't use much in battle. She's a ranged DPS, a mage, but she's best controlled by a knowledgeable player because the AI has some shortcomings that make her subpar otherwise. That said, she's probably the most important character in the plot, other than Shulk, and her story not only gets DLC privileges, but echoes all the way to Xenoblade Chronicles 3. Unlike Dunban, she's a genuine aristocrat, haughty and curt, but she mellows out over time, and as she's a partial outcast among her own royal court, she fits perfectly with the main cast as a paragon of the High Entia. Now Ricky looks like an infant and talks like your friend trying to do a Russian accent.
Friends, jumping ball! All go to Eric!
But he's actually 40 years old and has 11 children, meaning that unlike half the people watching this video, Ricky comes like it's Street Fighter. More importantly, Ricky fills a utility role in party composition, allowing him to DPS and heal fairly well. Even tank if you want. And I won't spoil the final party member yet. Speaking of the party, I have immense respect for the voice work. The localization was handled by Nintendo of Europe, and contrary to what you might expect,
Well, at least we're not getting slaughtered in mathematics class!
the entire cast is really strong all the way through. I believe the characters when they talk, when they scream.
Why can't I use the Monado?
Won't matter, you're still flesh and blood, and I reckon you're nearly done!
Leave these to me! Don't take him out!
And nobody is really annoying at any point. Like, yes, Ricky exists and his accent is something.
This is legendary hero pun Ricky!
But to be fair, he dies in his introduction scene.
Watch out!
Get off me! To you!
Right in the... Take this, bubble!
I'm not sure why people write character build guides or write obvious fanfiction heart-to-hearts on the wiki when Ryan very clearly murders him on screen. When Ricky violently exploded on impact with the ground that day, the poets say the Napon tree was bathed not in red, but white. Thankfully, Xenoblade Chronicles joins TWIWY and other Omega Brain Genius games for working its narrative directly into its gameplay. Here's the rundown. You pick a party of 3, load them up with whatever gear you want, select a swath of skills which have to be individually leveled up, and enter battle in real time. It looks complex, because it is, but in practice, it's complex. Characters auto-attack when in range, which builds a big circular meter around your center button. That button is your character's trademark ability, more or less. Every other skill is unique to its character of origin, but that particular ability is fundamental. For Shulk, it's Monado arts, which mostly take care of instant kill boss mechanics and other piss-offs, or it'll just let you tack on big veiny damage. Otherwise, your normal arts are on MMO-like cooldowns. If you don't have effective loadouts or gem setups, these cooldowns can lead to long periods of downtime just auto-attacking, but for an effective player, it shouldn't be a problem. The combat really only improved as the games were made, if I'm being honest. On that note, this remastered version clarifies combat in some really significant ways, indicating when your backslash will actually get the extra damage, and readable buff and ailment indicators, among other quality-of-life changes. There's a gem crafting system that's weird and finicky and superfluous, but those gems can help shore up any kind of weakness or build to a specific combat role when slotted in gear, so you're really made to micromanage your characters. Add to this that combat revolves pretty heavily around turning the tide in your favor. You're expected to inflict a series of minor status ailments to gain control of the battlefield. The basic pattern involves inflicting break, then topple, then daze, which amounts to a prolonged stun on a single target. You might have figured that since the dedicated healer character Sharla is considered weak, healing isn't super necessary, and that's true. A lot of the game can be brute forced with a little mechanical knowledge and dodge power. Shulkrine Dunban burns through enemies when built right. Ricky and Melia can provide DPS and heals. Almost anything goes, but you've got to put in the work. And most characters can inflict at least one part of the break topple daze combo, so you can always form some kind of strategy out of your favorites. Between gem crafting and combos, it should be clear that nothing works in Xenoblade Chronicles without friends. Reliance on others and contributing in your own way is a concept that carries across entries. So I guess if you have no friends, Xenoblade Chronicles wants you to eat shit. Team attack is something you build up to and unleash to break action parity, letting you combo unimpeded by the real-time system. It's your strongest option whenever you have it, and it necessitates teamwork, even lets you pull off your crowd control combo all clean and easy like. I wasn't kidding about teamwork, by the way. That gem crafting system is interesting specifically because it's a team effort. It takes two characters working in unison, and each combination yields different results. Camaraderie and relationships are kind of core to Xenoblade, and that's where you get heart-to-hearts. Those optional scenes only unlock when pairs of characters have high enough affinity, something you earn in various ways, but mostly through combat. And raising your individual affinities among all party members unlocks passive skills you can choose from. You can make your party seriously overpowered if you take the time off the main path to improve teamwork and relationships. In retrospect, it's hardly a surprise that there's significant crossover between fans of Persona and Xenoblade. No, not like that, not like that! While I don't love setting up characters meticulously, and being made to hyper-focus on the mechanics and inter-party relationships, because really, I'd rather just pick my guy and win, but it captures the essence of the narrative really well, this impossible conflict waged on titans that you're made to prep for by scavenging and scouring the world for little upgrades, new armor pieces, anything you can find, tweaking the minutia of your gear slots to triumph, teaching and learning from your friends. And no, it's not genius for that. So many games did this stuff already, but it's very thorough about it. I think the clunk is deliberate, functioning both as an MMO callback for people who remember ranking up individual skills for cash in World of Warcraft, and as a neat narrative enhancer. Before leaving combat behind, the game makes a point of hyping up the Monado, this alien weapon, presumably the titular Xenoblade, and has to account for its powers in combat. On top of the various enemy mechanics that the Monado neutralizes, it also grants Shulk in-combat visions that allow him to take an action or warn another party member with a button, giving you control over that party member's next move. That's a pretty big deal. This isn't a BioWare RPG, okay? You don't have free control of every combatant. You're locked in at the start of combat. Only Shulk can have these, and it more or less guarantees that every player will use Shulk for the entire game, or at least have him in the party, unless they went down to easy mode on a whim because it's a real grind sometimes. I mean, you can't even damage mechons with regular weapons, you just clank. And yeah, you can find or purchase mechon damaging weapons for your team, but Shulk gets it for free. Otherwise, you need to break and topple to damage them effectively, meaning you'll need the Monado, or quality micromanagement / AI luck. Fits the story well enough. The sword's kind of everything. How's the story anyway? If I had to describe the story of Xenoblade Chronicles in a word, it wouldn't be enough. Ignoring the intricate setting and world building, all the world-specific nouns, the game hides so much stuff that it pulls out beat by beat, like constantly revealing flashcards featuring horrendous images. You know, this scene it's lamprey fingers, next scene it's goatsy. It really doesn't hold back with the madcap reveals, and that can make it hard to appreciate because work that aspires to an endless series of mind-blow moments runs the risk of being swept up in its own madness, the value and weight of the events obscured by explosions. Let's see how things go. The plot of Xenoblade Chronicles 1 is best appreciated after the fact, and it's for more than a couple reasons. It's kind of like being dropped into the middle of Game of Thrones without a lexicon, only you don't realize you're in Game of Thrones and think you're in the Shire for at least half the journey. It does this by concealing key premises and nouns until very late in the game that recontextualize most of the adventure. So the first thing to know is the adventure. Most of that early game revolves around the hunt for Metalface, or as he's known in Japan, Blackface, because he's black and has a face. And that early segment is really compelling specifically because of the high emotion and high stakes underdog vibe. You're a pack of regular people with exactly one ace up your sleeve. Eventually Dunman and Shulk's adoptive father Dixon step in to help drive off Metalface during a particularly lethal encounter. And during that fight, Shulk gets a vision of a strange place, people dying, and Metalface. Dixon figures it's Prison Island, and so the party goes. That's basically how the plot keeps itself lubricated. The world is big, but as long as you've got a kid wielding an oversized crackerjack prize and a worldly mentor to guide the party, you can go anywhere. It just takes an MP4 and some time. Chasing this vision, the party passes through a jungle and Shulk ends up separated for a moment. He's attacked by creatures, and this anime kid, who used to be someone's keyholder in the original, I guess, but they changed it, sweeps up the Monado and effortlessly drives the monsters back. Zero explanation given, does a miracle, refuses to elaborate, leaves. In seed planting ass game, the entire High Entia diversion happens in pursuit of this one vision. You rescue Princess Melia. Oh, and that's when you simultaneously meet and kill Ricky, by the way. Melia leads you through the land of her people, who've sealed themselves away, literally made themselves inaccessible with their floating city, peering down above it all. The section drags a bit because Melia matters to the series as a whole, and the High Entia are ultimately instrumental in uniting the people of the Bionis in the war effort. Melia undergoes a solo trial to become the next queen, and is almost assassinated, but saved by you at the last second because, once again, Shulk is given a vision of the attack. You see how this works, right? It's a convenient plot device. In fact, some might say it's too convenient, but it's like that for a reason. Shulk and co. eventually hit Present Island and meet this giant who offers to unlock the true power of the Monado. While he does, Metalface appears and spears the guy to death. I warned about spoilers, by the way. I wasn't playing around, and I mean it. A mechanized Fiora saves Metalface and flies off, leaving Shulk dumbfounded. The plot gets a good bit of lubrication out of Fiora. First, we're chasing her killers down. Next, she's being puppeteered in front of our faces. Unbelievable. Through the snowy peaks, the party finds and confronts Fiora, only to be stopped by Metalface. What the Mumkar from the intro, Dunban's traitor war buddy, intercepts the party to keep Fiora in check. Dunban goes ape, and Mumkar only lives because a new golden Mechon saves him. The party, finally at the relative peak of the Bionis, resolve to cross over into enemy territory, into the heart of the Mechonis. At this point, Shulk, Rhine, and Dunban are driven primarily by Fiora and Metalface. Charla remains hopeful about her husband who went missing. After all, if Fiora is still technically alive, why not him? Melia is the most recent party member, but even she is driven by the death of her father, also at the hands of Metalface. There's a pretty palpable shift in tone leaving the Bionis. It was lush and lively, even magical, and heading into the home turf of the enemy, a seemingly mindless mechanical death force that's primarily hunted humankind to near extinction and can't be harmed by regular weapons. Well, that weighs on a player. Nearing the Mechonis proper, the party confronts Mumkar again, and Shulk stops Dunban from killing him. It had me up and yelling.
Okay, let's go! This is some top tier reaction content on YouTube. Alright. Shulk, what the fuck?
Because setting everything aside, Mumkar was a worthless bum in his regular life and almost cost his comrades their lives. He's so bad he's called Blackface, dude! Basically, he's totally irredeemable. Even the game agrees with me. Despite being spared, he still finds a way to get impaled due to his ego. Well, you can stuff a human in a metal suit, but you can't take the human out of the mech. Oh, that's gonna be a plot point, isn't it? The entire Mechonis section culminates in the Goldface Mechon neutralizing the Monado, causing Fiora to tank the fight, sending everybody sailing over the edge of a tower. Finally free of Mechon influence, Fiora is rescued by the party and brought to a local Machina settlement. It turns out there's humanoid life on this thing. I like this section for a lot of reasons. Fiora gets criticism for mostly being a Shulk support bot, and acknowledged, yes, but they were friends since youth, and she wants to marry the guy. I can dig it. And we've been fighting for actual hours to get revenge, and we're gifted this opportunity to save the character we thought we lost. After that last fight, we learned that the Monado isn't just fallible, it's counterable. But Fiora was able to contribute meaningfully, and now the entire journey up until this point, which stands dangerously close to being compromised, is suddenly sparking with hope. Not only that, but we've gotten triple confirmation through Mumkar, Fiora, and the Machina race that the Mechons are not mindless, and more than that, the very human desire to spare any needless bloodshed might be in reach. The party doesn't necessarily have to stoop to committing the same atrocities as the Mechons did in retaliation. In spite of all this new information, they might still be the heroes. Charla's subplot becomes relevant here. Her husband Gatto is revealed as Jadeface, another Mechon warrior who ultimately sacrifices himself to save the party, again showing the resilience of the human spirit. Goldface, or Eggle, activates the Mechonis and attacks the Bionis directly, condemning countless lives to an early and unexpected death. Eventually, the party catches up with Eggle and defeats him in combat. Shulk almost gives into rage, but spares Eggle at the last moment, showing incredible discipline and not compromising on his ideals. For this, he's shot in the back by Dixon. Okay. After most of the grounded elements play their part, the story goes kind of insane here. Not that it's a problem, it's just that it flips the entire plot on its head. Zanza pops out of Shulk, just shoots out a god. Turns out Shulk had Zanza inside of him since youth, when his parents died in an exposition to find... Exposition. That may be the mother of all Freudian slips. Died in an expedition to find the Monado, which Zanza's soul was residing in, and Dixon rescued Shulk from. Dixon, Albus, and the woman who conspired to have Melia killed are all Zanza's disciples. Zanza is the soul of the Bionis, effectively a god who created all life on the Bionis. Not only that, Zanza also inhabited the body of the giant we met on Prison Island to manipulate Shulk into doing his bidding along with every major Monado vision, which a particularly attentive player might realize weren't just potential futures, but recut visions of a future used to manipulate Shulk into certain beliefs and behaviors, into not questioning the potential sentience of the Mechons because, as you'd expect, Zanza wants to destroy the Mechonis completely. And it's a complex moment, because we have genuine reasons to despise the Mechons. They kill people. They attacked the Bionis. But zooming out, the player realizes that the events of the plot, much the way climbing the Bionis illustrates the relative puniness of the struggle, are a single snapshot of an ancient conflict bigger than any single life, any person. And to complicate this further, the Mechonis also has a deity, Mayneth, whose soul was sleeping but awoke and was secretly implanted by Vinea, the leader of the Machina people and sister of Egil, specifically to give the Mechons a champion. And she wields her own Mechon Monado, which Zanza swipes, giving the shit-eating Jod of the Bionis ultimate power, a trio of goons, and an ancient score to settle, which results in the annihilation of the Mechonis. In the end, Shulk resolves to destroy Zanza and create a world with no need for gods. After a really unnecessary boss rush section, seriously, this game adores its runtime. It's generously watered. You finally face down Zanza. None of that ending bit really speaks to me. There's probably a very intelligent point grounded in philosophy textbook material about Shulk rising up to kill a godlike version of himself. Yeah, check out Juju of Nazareth over here. Instead, I enjoy the signifiers, misdirections, and the plain truth about the Bionis foreshadowed in the intro. From a storytelling perspective, I think it's really solid work presenting a very clearly understood good and evil paradigm and eroding it over time. It doesn't erase the goods and evils of the moment, doesn't make those conflicts futile, but placing them in a historical lineage demystifies them, doesn't cast them as irrefutable and inherent traits of these opposing powers, but contextualizes them realistically. We're also shown that the Bionis feeds off the very life it produces and enables a mutualistic parasitism. It lives because organic beings die, and organic beings live because they're granted the possibility of life. That's why the game positioned us where it did in the intro. It demonstrated this dark secret that's only revealed in the final segment, in the first hour. Not content to let mysteries remain mysteries, Xenoblade Chronicles shows us the point of origin of the game's universe, with the scientist Klaus doing something stupid on account of his hubris and roping his coworker into it. To make it simple, he flipped a very uh-oh switch that destroys the Earth and shunts both him and his assistant into another universe where they preside as gods, Zanza and Mayneth. All of this, every event, was predicated on some jackass doing jackass things and eventually, after the years weathered him, wanting to be remembered, leading to the war between the Mechonis and the Bionis. Xenoblade is really concerned with wrapping things up neatly and explaining itself like it got called into the principal's office. It's a very dense story, enough that I now know the Monado grants foresight because the ether of the world, the magical energy in the very air, is calculable, allowing the wielder to visualize where every particle is, was, and will be. Also, that the Monado wasn't going to be a problem in the intro because it actually can't harm the races of the Bionis. Except all those animals, I guess. I do think the love and effort seeding the work bleeds through the experience, even if I'm not crying at the end like some of the others. In fact, the devs themselves confirmed it was a fairly transformative process.
While gaining strength from failure is something that might not be very desirable from a business standpoint, he says that for creators, it becomes a huge driving force. Steady ratings and sales and establishing brands leads to creators working as if they are on top of an unmoving rock. And while this may lead to pride and confidence, it also has the danger of misunderstanding the reasons for success and overconfidence. Takahashi thinks that the power to struggle against adversity, the power to not fear change, and the power to change are born from failure, and Xenoblade is what taught him that.
So let's talk Future Connected for approximately 5 minutes. A new story was added to this definitive version of the game, meant to fill the gap between 1 and 2 and cap off Melia's plot. It features 2 Nopon named Nene and Kino, so you know it's good. Future Connected simplifies things from a gameplay perspective, eliminating superfluous elements like the visions, which always lasted just long enough to drive me insane, and skill trees, and chain attacks, which were replaced by union strikes that only unlock once you found a bunch of Nopon hiding in the wild? Yeah, good world mastery combat tie-in, but counterpoint. This epilogue mostly deals with the fallout of the party's actions. That is, once a real existential threat was dealt with by a handful of mortals, every other insignificant dicknose had to turn into a mincing, bigoted Actually, the world's extant races aren't terrible together, but they're beginning to form splinter groups. The High Entia in particular aren't great about this, and they've got a pureblood faction that's just as scummy as any real-world faction pretending that blood has any bearing on the worth of a person. You want to be worthwhile in this world? Don't get a blood purity test. Get off your ass and do something. Future Connected is pretty, as in visually pretty, but also pretty slow and boring, and it can't possibly approach the weight of the endgame you just beat because the stakes are almost non-existent by comparison. And I don't know, calling the big bad the Fog King, a name associated with 2 cooler Yu-Gi-Oh cards, I mean, getting your ass beat by King Fog, bro. Pack it up. I think it wraps up the story nicely anyway.
Oh, Sauron.
Putting Melia on the throne for good and tying into the 3rd entry, but that's spoiler territory within spoiler territory. Now, I like Xenoblade Chronicles, and I respect the depth of its artistry. It's pretty clearly designed by people interested in the particulars, and that can only result in a world that people who appreciate the particulars fall in love with. It drummed up a strong fan base and set the stage for incredible sequels, myriad potential universes, and even more powerful stories. But before the true sequel, there was another game. If you had one chance to change everything, what if you changed your clothes? And also you had sunglasses now because you're really cool. Xenoblade X is simply one of the games made. What is it with y'all and X, huh? Before starting this project, and every other time I mentioned it publicly, I was asked if I would play X. Originally, I wasn't going to. I mean, that isn't a 2 or a 3. That is a 10, like Roman-wise, and on the Kino charts as well. I love fence-sitting on fandom issues. When you've got exactly one dog in the race, that being your own video-making ethos, you don't have to read or care about fandom opinions too much. And that's really freeing because I'll walk into something plenty of players won't even bother with and say it's easily top 2. But I would not say that because that would be a problem. Xenoblade Chronicles X suffers from an optics issue not too dissimilar from DMC Devil May Cry. Fans who played the original didn't understand the very clear shift in everything, and were probably afraid that Xenoblade Chronicles was over. The Fabled 2 would never happen, or at least not how they wanted it. It's a trap that I've fallen into, so I can at least sympathize, but time heals wounds, or at least scabs them over, and I got the best possible chance to play the thing at 1080p 60 FPS, something you can never go back to. I can't believe the Xenoblade Chronicles games are locked on the Nintendo Dungeon, man, for a series that cares about presenting enormous, lush worlds. Monolithsoft has to make a hell of a lot of technical compromises, and they're absolute artisans for it. And let's take my background into account here. I don't exactly drool over lengthy JRPGs. I'm interested in them, but won't usually make the time unless I'm getting paid. Because man, that is not a game. That's a full-time job. I like mechanically schwacked games, though, and I've read enough books that video game stories have to make use of the medium well to really impress me. That or make me cry by the end. Thankfully for Xenoblade, the games are so long, it's hard not to get kind of invested. X in particular cares more about raw gameplay and novel concepts, some that were never repeated again going forward, and that's where my appreciation lies. We love a black sheep, so in case you were worried about my coverage of X, we're cool. Xenoblade Chronicles X opens with a character creator, which is partly why I keep bringing up MMOs. Every entry is features of that genre, spun for a single-player JRPG experience, but this brought me right back to World of Warcraft, minus the faces. You can even fill out your name. It's a bold choice, and definitely rubs some people the wrong way. It's hard to go from Shulk, omni-important protag of the first game, to whatever crap you can stitch together in this weird anime doll factory, and you're a silent protag too, to find purely by cutscene actions, your in-game decisions, and the occasional dialogue choice. Seriously, the balls on these devs. Now, I have a partially functioning brain, even if it's somewhat digested by worms, so this stuff doesn't bother me at all. I think silent protags have a purpose, especially in a non-numbered, almost spin-off title, and story doesn't only mean writing and cutscenes. Actually, what is this story? Earth is lost moments into the first cutscene, and you're one of the last remaining survivors. Unfortunately, your ship crash lands on an alien planet, and you're awoken by Alma. Normally, I'd call her white hair and young face combo sus, but coming off that character creator, I guess I'm ready for anything. You're led through an intro section much shorter than the first games, and that's mostly because cutscenes are limited, and the cast isn't as obvious, if that makes any sense. You can work with every character you meet eventually, but the main party only consists of 3 regular fighters, and you're one of them. I didn't realize this little Korean girl was a main character, straight up no clue, until she was mandatory for every story mission. Of the 2 people introduced in this scene, which one do you want watching your back? This waif who engineers critical design flaws into her mech suits? Or this guy and his enormous gun? You know, thanks, Lynn, I'll take Doug. X doesn't need an opulently directed, inciting incident like the first guy. I mean, unless they're talking about the Earth. Nobody needs to get stabbed, positioning the player as one of the few living humans anywhere in the galaxy, reduced to scraping out an existence on a hostile planet teeming with gargantuan creatures and alien species is some pretty solid motivation. Really sucks you with the frailty of life, the sheer weight of responsibility. Oof. In case the player is lacking motivation, you find an alien species very early that you can try to make peace with, and they basically tell you to eat They call humans a plague, something that needs to be eradicated, and suddenly the stakes split the sky. Not only are you surviving, surrounded by danger, you're actively wanted dead by at least one group of people with guns. It's a harrowing kind of experience. I think players are used to RPGs where if you just select all the good dialogue options, you can basically act as a paragon of righteousness and everybody will love you, save only the jerkest of asses. In Xenoblade Chronicles X, you might not want conflict, but you don't have a choice. And there, upon the plains, the crack blows in on Fell Gamer wins. The MMO begins in earnest. The player officially joins up with the Human Resistance Corps, Blade, or Builders of the Legacy after the destruction of Earth. That's an okay name, I guess. Back in my day, when I played MMOs, we called our guilds like Beep Beep I'm a Jeep lol. You can pick from one of several squads, each focused on a different task and granting unique passive bonuses, and you rise through the ranks of each in specific ways that gel with the fantasy of, say, being a mediator or a prospector, with the ultimate purpose of filling up a Blade experience bar to unlock more subsystem minutia. I can't help it, bro. Get me choosing a class in a guild, performing a role, and I'm cooked. I love this game. This feature also tied directly into the online mode. Let's see, Wii U only, released in 2015. Well, it's 2023 now. Good luck, bro! Once that's decided, you'll learn about developing weapons and investing in corporations to greenlight new shop items, which is the fastest and most reliable way to upgrade gear. X is packed with side quests, the number 2 reason to get out and do things alongside main story progression, and the number 1 reason to get out for Xenoblade 1 enjoyers. You got plenty of story cutscenes compared to other franchises, but it's gotta feel like a downgrade coming off the first. Not to me, though. I've got a gun! You've got some friends, a squad, and a million little tasks to complete. The next main story quest won't unlock until you're level 10, or you've worked up your affinity with a particular character, or you've brought someone coffee, or you've sucked someone's So it's off to the overworld. The zones you walk into, the paths you make, and the ways you find are handled so much better in X than any other Xenoblade game, and it's not close. The original title had solid presentation and obvious beauty, both in aesthetics and construction, but when you rub off the veneer and peel back the paint, you're left with boring overland slogs through seemingly endless battles. And that's true in all 3 major entries because all of them are lacking something very important: a good jump button. Why do you think the most famous video game guy's number 1 thing is jump? He's called Jump Man. You do the math. The overworld is vast. It slopes down and spikes up. It's riddled with danger. But you can run and jump and find your own routes through the zones. I have no idea why they never went back to this basic concept. I understand that allowing the player to jump can introduce bugs and unintended out-of-bounds moments, and X was designed in its own unique way. Maybe it just wouldn't work, but I'm telling you, I turned on Xenoblade Chronicles X and got warped all the way back to vanilla World of Warcraft, weaving through Stranglethorn and avoiding danger. It's the ultimate overworld experience in a Xenoblade game. It makes you a genuine explorer, not just some lumpy let free in a pen. But I got the sense the world was interesting for more than its jump button, and it turns out that the devs planned for it.
Also, when the player needs to go from point A to point B to progress the story, for example, however hard we may try to create something really worthwhile to be explored between these 2 points, it would be meaningless if the player could not realize that something might be there in that part of the world.
And there's plenty to explore, all kinds of wreckage, human outposts, caves, and secret ways. The entire field is literally dotted with materials for crafting and side quest completion. I won't lie, that part of the game is questionable. First off, you're driving the OCD kids nuts, Monolithsoft, come on. And like NPCs will ask for 3 dung piles or something, and there's never any indication in-game on where to find them. You're just expected to pick up everything. Granted, these items tend to spawn in specific areas, so if you go out looking on a wiki, you can keep your Travis touchdown duties to a minimum. Otherwise, the levels are all video game varied. You've got grass place, sand place, jungle place, lots of places, dangerous places, cool places. Admittedly, none of it is quite as varied or fantastical as the progression of the other games. It's just hard to match that imagery. But it does manage to feel like more of a contiguous, semi-believable world, a landmass to uncover, piece by piece, instead of, again, roaming through a pen. I love these little pop-ups you get when you find a really great view. Like, the devs swooped in all, yeah, great view, huh? Are you patting yourselves on the back for making that? Or just acknowledging that it looks good? I know it looks good, dipshit. I'm looking right now till your pop-up ruined it. Let's not forget the home base, New Los Angeles. I mean, of all the cities that needed a new one, it's divided into little districts, you know, shopping, residential, etc. Man, what a game. Jumping on houses. Buddy pulled out the moon shoes. His knees will be paced in a week. The scale is incredible, honestly, and that's true for most of this game, but no other Xenoblade entry is so confident with letting the player root around, gaze out, dig in. It just hits different. It's another flavor of epic. One that's exciting to be immersed in, one that feels viscerally real till you jump from 30 stories. Just kidding. He lived. Sure, that's nothing to worry about. Where are my manners? Let's meet the crew. The pro tag doesn't have much going on. You can make them whoever you want and class them up however you want. Tank, bruiser, gunner, mage, healer. It's an impressive system, and one that doesn't lock you in permanently. If you want to run down one single class tree and fire dual pistols all game, cool. If you want to jump around, why not? The joy of the character doesn't come from the story moments, but personally stepping into Xenoblade Chronicles. And I think that's worth the price of admission, at least for character builder types. Alma seems pretty boring at the start. This game isn't known for its cast, really, but she's the leader of your little group and handles most of the important dialogue. Given that she looks like an anime character with dual swords and guns, you get the sense that she's more than just another person. I mean, Lynn here is just some Korean girl, so Alma is a bit of a mystery by comparison, but good for landing the heroic monologues when necessary.
I cannot say I understand your plight, but humanity lost its home, just like you.
Oh, Lynn's the tank. Somehow. We don't ask, like, I don't see the point in asking. Lynn's some kind of gearhead genius, channeling Shulk's energy, probably through the hairpins. Yeah, you ain't slick. Like most child genius characters, she's fairly annoying because it's either weirdly cynical dialogue, necessarily cruel or ignorant fluff, edgy humor. I don't know. I think she contrasts well with Alma, at least. I mean, Lynn basically exists so the comic relief can receive regular harassment, so maybe she's fine, actually. Tatsu is... Someone on Twitter called Tatsu a KBash core character. Damn, that's good. While I, and most Westerners in general, tend to hate on cutesy humanoid mascot characters that seemingly break any kind of fundamental respect for the setting.
Welcome to Sandy Bum Canyon.
I have to admit, his brand of silly is really welcome in game. It's a stoic, austere, even dull experience at times, and Tatsu rounds it out. And he's from an established Xenoblade race, the Nopon, so he's a useful, friendly, familiar alien creature the humans rely on.
Or does Lindley think she's better namer than native Mirren
What are you gonna say now, you colonizer?
The offbeat, whimsical bullshit works contextually. I mean, until Lynn kills him for dinner.
Time to eat, everyone.
Tatsu doesn't do anything in combat, like, Actually, he doesn't appear in combat. His only real talents are being round and getting a little creamy.
Oh, in the perfect size for Tatsu.
I only really bring him up because he occupies a good chunk of the screen time and mostly sits out so you can have a flex party slot. Because there are a lot of side characters to chat up and quest with. That's another thing that grates original formula fans. Most of the characterization is fairly flat, and while piles of dialogue exist between different party members, X weights its budget very differently than the original. You just don't get the extravagant, epic cutscenes one used to illustrate the scale of the conflict. They were long and often cut back and forth to show different perspectives or simultaneous events. In X, you're usually being fed contextually relevant banter and cutscenes or brief cutaways to show the machinations of your enemies, but the difference is palpable. And if you really want to watch everything, it's going to come down to side quests with the whole roster of people available in NLA. A lot of the scenes are mundane, down-to-earth, gag anime fare. It's nothing like the original at all, at least in terms of quantity. I don't hate it, though. I think it's relatively profound to lay out an extremely heavy existential plot and pad out the downtime with humans being human, living their lives and finding joy in moments. I just can't find fault in that approach. Most of what you actually do with these characters is combat, though, so let's get the teenager coated in Xenoblade. To make it simple, the core is familiar, but the particulars have been shuffled, shifted, or evolved. Combat's still a real-time MMO-ass experience, auto attacks and all, and really, the only major difference that warps how it plays completely is the jump button again, giving the player the freedom to position around enemies with maximum ease tied to a little dexterity application. Makes this particular system so hard to let go of. Monolithsoft continued to innovate on the established rules and flow of combat going forward, but I really feel that X was designed to bridge the gap between the original's combat and fun. It's not that the original was bad, it's that the downtime, combined with slowly trudging around any given enemy to pull off positional moves, starts to drag, especially in a game with such a slow overall pace, with so many enemies to beat. The time it takes to kill anything might be small in some setups, but it's still much longer than the time it'd take to clean up any random battle in most JRPGs ever made. X is a lot more involved, makes you rapidly reposition for efficiency. There's a greater demand for precise, deliberate action. This got you schmovin', bro! It wants you engaged, especially when you take healing into consideration. And because no major party member is a healer by trade, and because Xenoblade Chronicles 1 was a praise kink simulator, X builds on it mechanically with the soul voice system, which is pretty complex to describe, and you can get through the game not even interacting with the menu if you're really scared. But to be quick, characters will shout things out mid-combat, asking for a buff or a stagger or something, causing any appropriate skill on your bar to light up. And if you fulfill the request, you'll both get HP. Occasionally, you'll have to meet a mid-battle challenge, like dropping your enemy to 30% HP, and upon doing so, you'll get a little quick-time event. Success will make your controlled character request something from your friends, and if an ally responds, you'll heal or fill a gauge. This is all very complex and isn't communicated very well, but to be fair, Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is very popular. The system is fun and frantic. You're often racing through your skill bars to slam the next button in order, positioning around enemies, reacting to soul voice stuff and quicktime events, that kind of thing. It's serving, dude. It's offering up a direct through line from the vision system and tying party relations directly into the combat. I love a good ludonarrative harmony, especially when it makes the game more interactive. Admittedly, I played hard DPS with plenty of mobile action hero skills, and it's very possible to end up with a less enjoyable class, but you can swap and rebuild your character anytime. Maybe it's best knowing what you want to do in-game heading in, though. Save yourself some time and look at the classes so your skill points aren't wasted in other class skill sets. Like the original, bars and gauges matter. You can spend portions of a bar you build with auto attacks to resurrect fallen allies, just like before, or build it and blow for an overdrive technique. They're kind of unparsable visually, but it's just hella attacks that can have compounding benefits if your allies manage to pop theirs during the time frame. I played Xenoblade Chronicles X on normal mode and never really needed to sit down and rip apart the system. Despite its complexities, and I think the game is tuned for it, it's highly challenging at times, but if you're keeping up on all the little fronts you can, skills, gear, mechanics, levels, you'll be fine. Bad news for kids who ate homework. Outside of party shuffling, the only real shake-up combat gets, and world exploration as well, is the introduction of a brain-altering substance known as Skell. Little tangent here. I have never watched even one episode of Gundam. Anything. The closest I've gotten to mecha media would be Zoids, I think, and I've never been able to get truly into this stuff. Couldn't tell you why. But when Xenoblade Chronicles X injected the Skell serum directly into my brainstem, I experienced something totally new. Like joy. Like Logan Paul finally seeing colors, except real and not played for views. Skells round the game out so well. Just when you're exhausted with overland travel in beautiful zones, you can hit the skies and see them from a completely new angle. I can't even believe these sights, man. Shoot, even before unlocking the flight module, just driving around in your little transformer, finding new broken paths to engage with the environment, chart unintended routes, literally skip quest combat.
Oh my god.
Skells make the whole game better, and it's not even controversial, not for a second. They even improve combat. You can tinker with models and weapon parts, knives, guns, slap a 30-foot sword on that, fly around looking for trouble. Admittedly, G-Busters don't just break the game open, they cleave it in half. But not every fight lets you use Skells, and in prolonged battles you might run out of fuel. Speaking from experience, it's balanced well enough for a general audience. If anything, it's just another health bar packing some insane combat options. How? Guys, Monolithsoft, between jumping and Skells, all I can guess is you're scared of how those other games would break in half if mobility options expanded. You know, you can make them fit any given setting. There's always some kind of mech. And yet the game some fans won't even acknowledge in serious discussion. That's the one that gets it. Gets fun, believe me. I know. Everyone who asked if I was playing Xenoblade X did it because they knew the game was grindy and samey. Not as epic or character-driven as the other 3 games, but I'm gonna level with you. Doing a long, protracted series of combats into a boss fight, into a cutscene, into another long, protracted series of combats is what Xenoblade Chronicles writ large sells to the player. It's literally just the core loop, and this entry ain't all that different. Sanding off some of the story elements to make room for an ascended gameplay experience is a fine trade-off. I don't see the slog of 1 or 2 or 3 as meaningfully different from the slog of X. All of them have it. They're 60-hour games. I'm not going to be disappointed in X because the game let me jump and fly. On top of the hunter-level cunning of regular navigation and the free-roam potential of Skells, the player is also made to chart out a significant portion of the map. You'll be locked out of story missions if you don't probe every inch, and they tied it to the Wii U gamepad. Suddenly, I know a lot of the map, like the back of my hand, because damn, I planted those probes. I did them quests. I fiddled with the systems. I looked for the items that spawn specifically in this or that point. I was there. I think it's fine to be turned off by that level of exploration. It gets pretty thorough, thoroughly annoying, but at least the thing's beautiful and engaging to explore. This is a world you master. This is a world you become intimate with. It's not a world where you flit casually between colonies and talk to some dude named Peppino. Yo, wait a minute! And never finish their side quest. The worst part about X is that nobody except enthusiasts gets to play it, and the online's basically a non-option unless you've got friends. A lot of people wanted me to cover those things as well, like online raids and other things, and big surprise, but I'm letting those people down. They existed at one point, and I like the inclusion of online elements in a Xenoblade game, even if they clash with the original epic solo JRPG vibe. There's really no more appropriate framework for a game about banding together to save humanity, you know, joining up with your friends and hitting buttons. It also let the devs pull a dry run of what happened in 2. And by that I mean DLC, turning the games into content factories. Sorry, live service experiences. But I can appreciate a little old era DLC before the EA premium currencies and anti-consumer practices. Back when you could buy a few hours of a good time and felt like you were supporting something you loved. Before heading into the plot, I'd be dropping the ball, not to mention the OST. X is the only game of every entry to include tracks with lyrics for each portion of the game. The OSTs of this series are incredible as far as video game scoring goes, capturing fantastical moods and vibrations at a consistent quality that's rare for many. I think they're approaching Chrono Cross in quality. Meanwhile, you're riding your Skell, flying through the sky with J-pop blasting, and you know, it's great too, they stick in your head. Most of the gameplay is nerdy mechanical stuff and MMO junk collecting, something not everyone is tuned into, and low somber tracks, reflective pieces, that sort of stuff might not have effectively carried the gameplay, but this stuff really does. So if the gameplay is good, And the tunes are good. What happened with the story? The plot makes use of several twists, almost all of which it pulls out in the finale, but one in particular is conveniently concealed by that most infamous of writerly cheap-outs, amnesia. Your character has no idea who they are or where they come from, and it lets the writers exposit about, say, the destruction of Earth, casually, and drop extremely key premises like 20 hours in. The main goal of Blade is finding the Lifehold, a big stasis chamber from that last remaining human escape ship, the White Whale, that apparently survived the crash on Mira. The Lifehold contains the majority of life on the ship. So, you go looking to populate NLA and save humanity. Pursuing this goal, the party meets up with Lau, another Blade squadron leader, and this Mira native, L, who humans would have surely tortured, interrogated, and ultimately dissected. But see, in this story, humans are at least kind of good, as opposed to realistic. You catch wind of a Lifehold pod in the region, but a Xeno blows it up. This Goetia character, part of the Ganglion, a group of alien races united in eradicating humankind. At least we know who the bad guys are. Jesus Christ. We also learned that the Ganglion were one of the major parties present in the battle for Earth, and they're here to finish the job. Sometime later, another alien ship crashes in Oblivia. The party finds a non-hostile alien species and helps them out, but during this leg of the adventure, you face off with a bunch of mechs, and Tatsu almost gets evaporated. Unfortunately, the protag selflessly jumps in the way. Your entire arm is blown to bits, but I guess everyone forgot to mention that you're not even in a real human body. None of you are. Silly amnesia, obfuscating fundamental realities of the scenario. See, everyone from Earth is stuck in Lifehold stasis, apparently controlling these pseudo-bodies, these mimiosomes, or mims as they call them. I want to say that explains the ridiculous character models with their gigantic insect eyes and tiny mouths, but really, that begs the question why you'd ever make a child-sized mimiosome or a weird, funny-face mimiosome, but hey, sure, maybe the scientists wanted to keep humans human, and I can respect that. Oh, and that number on the tower is actually how much power is left in the Lifehold, and if a power source isn't found, everyone dies. I'm motivated now, but I'm also extremely agitated. I mean, this is a lot to deal with. During these adventures, Tatsu nearly gets the party killed by being an idiot. Twice. 3 if you count me, earlier. This justifies the prolonged series of jokes about murdering him and consuming his flesh. I'm somehow completely neutral about this. I don't think I've ever fallen so evenly on both sides about anything. Another Lifehold pod mission leads to an attack by Ganglion at too perfect a moment. Alma believes there's a traitor but keeps quiet. Eventually, the Ganglion attack NLA itself, which leads to a pair of wacky malicious idiots getting beat back because my sword is simply bigger than them. Unfortunately, the Ganglion make off with a skell we retrieved that's particularly dangerous. Things come to a head in Silvalum. A third Lifehold location hunt leads to a wounded Lau. We leave him behind and find the signal, walking directly into a Xeno ambush. The kitty cat people are on the Ganglion payroll, so we stuff him in a fight and Alma succeeds a charisma check. Oh, I didn't realize the cat people were f***ing pussies, lol. Turning these guys on the Ganglion leader, Luxor. To the surprise of perhaps one person, Lau defects with the data terminal that would reveal the Lifehold core's location. So we hunt him down and it turns out Xenoblade X is immeasurably based. Lau reveals that he hates humanity because the White Whale is a product of unchecked hierarchical bullshit. The humans who actually got a spot on the last Earth escape ships were all wealthy, connected, elite. Every last one. And anyone else was left for dead. He's still seething with rage over the loss of those important to him and the utter falsehood of mankind's last hope. And ultimately, Lin protects him, the protag too. He gives up and sees reason. There's nothing to gain in burning it all up. The elite saved themselves, demonic but it's all dust now. With Lau's terminal, we locate the Lifehold and enter amidst Ganglion gunfire. This is where the game gets Xenoblade. We're in the Lifehold. Where the hell are the cores? Where are the bodies? Alma says we don't know the whole truth, and we immediately cut to a boss fight. Luxor. We learn a lot of useful information here. Humans are descendants of a powerful race that created the Ganglion to be servile. This ancient race also built a fundamental weakness into the Ganglion, human DNA. So like spit, And he falls and we get another drop. There aren't any organic humans in the lifehold at all, only data containing the memory and DNA of the humans on the ship. It's already gone, but Alma assures us it can be rebuilt. Suddenly, Luxor gets up and unleashes the lizards, and Lao stabs him from above, which sends them both into the plasma of human DNA, killing Luxor. Lao ends up possessed by the protoplasm and we get the final battle. It's hard to convey how hard this story hits because really, for most of the game it was dragging its feet, boring and slow, At least the game was fun. But now, you're pulling all this out? And Lao's rage is fairly sympathetic as a last gasp of revenge from every human sacrificed in the name of preserving the wealthy elite? It's powerful. In the end, we learn that there is one living body controlling a Mim in the lifehold. Alma, who is, in fact, a Xeno. Shows up, saves humanity with a convoluted plan, refuses to elaborate. Lamau. The post-credit scene really is the cherry on top. Alma probes the crashed lifehold after the dust is settled. In the ruin, she finds that the lifehold data was damaged beyond repair, but it was like that from the very beginning, meaning that every character should have been dead before the quest ever began. What the This is the curse of Xenoblade X. It's not even a spin-off, yet it's totally isolated within its own continuity, and that universe is really interesting. It's straight up incomplete. The developers actually let the mystery of the planet linger, even post-credits. Presumably, it would have been solved by a sequel or continuous DLC. Maybe the title really was just an experiment with the engine they built, but it leaves the player wanting anything. Lao shows up alive in the final scene, and that's literally just impossible. This story never truly ends, doesn't it? Doesn't it though? Different alien species can all understand each other perfectly, a fact they bring up in-game, but which is never explained or accounted for. For all we know, the planet's a simulation. It could have been the bedrock for a later game. There could be a sequel one day. The chief complaint against Xenoblade X is the story. It's not part of the overarching numbered entry megaplot. It's superfluous and padded. It's not even interesting. You can't even kill God this time. Xenoblade Chronicles X is a game deeply concerned with the motivations of humans thrust into a hostile environment and put through extreme pressure. It's putting the player into a similar situation as Xenoblade 1 and asking questions of humanity that, for example, Dune would. The plot leading up to the finale is fairly predictable, but the actual story is found among its varied cast members, how they interact, how they exert their humanity and use their time, how you interact with them. People, even in dire situations, still play, still act selfishly and altruistically in equal measure. The species is impossible to categorize and fundamentally chaotic, but it finds moments of order, inspired cooperation in truly grim times. And beyond those qualities, it retains the ludonarrative harmonies of 1, and I think it expands on them while losing some subsystems in the process. Not being interested in the title is understandable. It's a pretty steep buy-in, and even if you can get it free, it's a lot to grapple with, but the end result is one of the most functional, playable titles in the lineup with some of the most effective and inarguably correct critique about humankind today. Sorry, what? You still don't? What? That's crazy, bro. I can't even think. Could you speak up a little? The jet engines are drowning your words. Now let's see if I can figure out how this is supposed to work. Woo!
The name's Dahlia. Allow me to make your life as enchanting as possible.
Well, mamma mia!
What's going on in here?
Well, my wife of 5 years. It appears I've summoned an artificial, servile woman. What an unfortunate turn of events. Oh, please don't kill me. Xenoblade Chronicles 2. It was the best of games. It was the worst of games. It was games.
How may I be of service, Master?
You know, Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is kind of a hard filter entry, so let me pull out a parody segment real quick. Just humor me a little. It's called Mimesis. Bro, look it up. Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is a game where a scrawny loser with zero money and zero bills fails upward into the main character role because the universe felt so bad for his horrible fashion sense that they had to hand him a full-on harem of synthetic slaves. It's easily the most cringy anime anime schlock you've ever played. The writing and voice acting is embarrassing.
Pyra wouldn't do that.
Of course I wouldn't. I don't have a knife.
So serious. She...
And since it came from the land of crazy, wacky, cringe stuff, you should probably just pick up something with artistic integrity, like Call of Duty. Play the new Assassin's Creed for the low price of full retail, plus a full month's rent of DLC content. The discourse is foul, and somewhere, deep in the discussion, is a full-on content mine of legitimate criticisms that some people rebut in bad faith, and others with good intentions. It's a real muddy conversation, so I need you to know that everything else aside, this is a Xenoblade Chronicles game. If your first instinct is to cringe, well, all I'm saying is Monolithsoft happens to be headed by an artisan tier team. Every aspect of these games is deliberate and intentional, and if something is grating, there's probably a reason, or a greater purpose informing any particular creative decision.
That is just inexcusable.
And I dislike lots about the thing myself, but they also gave us the Torna DLC, so who can say what's good or bad? Xenoblade Chronicles 2 intros with this kid named Rex hauling up some treasure from the ocean. A sea of clouds, he dives for a living. It's the most fantastical setting of any game yet. The giant mech concept was fascinating, but all of human existence being relegated to the backs of these leviathans floating in something that looks like a sky, but isn't. It's a unique fantasy setting that manages to capture the original and spin it fresh. The game catches a lot of strays, and by strays I mean direct bullets to the chest over its intro sequence, something people consider slow and boring. And annoying. I'm a little torn. Yeah, lots of games could strive to be Vagrant's story, immediately suck the player in with god-tier cinematic framing, leading with the action, but this thing's a little more mellow, not dissimilar from the first game actually. They're both long, drawn-out segments that demystify the world a bit, ground the player in the setting. Yeah, it's all wood and metal instead of green fields, but the intentions are similar. Only the original made a point of establishing the conflict and tying the player directly to the conflict with Shulk succeeding Dunban. 2 gives us enough, certainly with the dive for the Aegis, the inciting incident, but just like Rex's costume, it takes time to appreciate. So, sounds like that filter's polished pretty well. The grand plot kickoff in question involves Rex taking a job to dig through a shipwreck for some treasure. One member of the group you're hired into is on the back of the box, and this guy straight up attacks you, so that's fine. I don't need any trickery or backstabbing. That'd just be tacky, right? I know what I'm in for now. You find what they're looking for, this Aegis, some kind of super weapon girl, and you're promptly stabbed in the back. Dude. What did I just say? An anime girl in basically Eden tells you she'll share her life force with you, allowing you to survive, bonded to this girl so long as you promise to take her here someday. Elysium.
Now place your hand on my chest.
What? Are you sure?
Now, this is fairly high concept and makes some non-JRPG gamer types trip, so let me just say in this universe, mortals bond with artificial life forms called blades and battle together as partners. The mortals who can do this, and it isn't everybody, are called drivers. Nia here is bonded with her blade, Dromark, this tiger thing. So no, it's not some perverted anime girl slavery thing the way it gets talked about, and if anything, Rex is a perfect gentleman who's made to deeply understand interpersonal relationships even when it's difficult, for the sake of saving the world. And that's extremely fertile ground for a Xenoblade Chronicles story. Certainly if Xenoblade Chronicles is synonymous with people learning to understand each other, working toward a common goal. People doing people good like. But you know that if you care to look into it. Eventually you're left to your own devices after like 2 or 3 hours, and you can finally play Xenoblade Chronicles 2. This prompted me to experiment really early with the combat system because, this is the first area, guys. I mean, and I learned some things. First, everybody's favorite whipping boy complaint. The tutorials aren't great. In fact, you're better off finding a YouTube channel to explain basic combat flow and gameplay expectations because raw text boxes spat out one after another aren't exactly intuitive teaching tools. This guy has a job because of this stuff. Think about that. Some mechanics get a tutorial and they're not usable until many hours into the game. Talk about having schwacked priorities. But I learned something really quickly that kind of blew my mind. In a game series that revolves around basic attacks, you can reset the auto attack timer by tapping a direction, moving just a hair. Oh my god. You can absolutely cram damage into enemies like Thanksgiving turkeys, bro, and every hit helps lower your ability cooldowns. Rex has one that drops a healing potion, so you can obliterate the early game and a good chunk of the experience in general with a little mechanical knowledge, but we'll do the combat breakdown later. For now, know that even if things seem tough and complex and boring, you can find your fun in the game. The world itself is interesting. Those earlier titles had issues on their consoles of origin, but that was par for the course, especially on Nintendo hardware, and 2 here suffers occasionally from frame dips and slowdown too. It's more noticeable out of handheld mode, and frankly, I'm surprised Monolithsoft games even ship how they do. It's easy to call out technical issues when you see them, but not know anything about what's keeping these pieces together, and I'm genuinely afraid they topple like a house of cards in the face of a light breeze. It's probably why no Skell or Skell-like concept returned, but genuinely, what do I know? The environments are heartbreaking, exactly the kind of places you'd want to explore with that Xenoblade stank, like the good kind. Varied colors, day-night cycles, glowing scenery, and endless variants. There's vines to climb, caves to find. They're great, except for the field skills. Okay, I'm sorry. They're not awful, but let's talk. Early on, you'll find blocked passages, gated with skill checks. Basically, you'll need a blade or a lot of blades with certain passive field skills that unlock the ability to move forward. Not unlike needing a rogue in a Dragon Age game to crack open a chest or unlock a door. So you think, okay, that means I'm supposed to come back here. Which is true, except by come back later, the game's actually telling you, go play a stupid gotcha phone game, and my patience is already running thin. Yeah, on top of being aggravatingly slow at times, just with poor performance on occasion. It's the Switch's first JRPG, what are you gonna do? And having to sit through the intro, learning to like Rex, you're made to root around in the stinkiest RPG pit I've ever seen, to traverse the game world. In Xenoblade X, you got a jump button and eventually a flying mech. Jesus Christ! This title in particular loves depthy mechanics. It feels like they only ramped up as the series went on, so you'll forgive me if this gets a little complex. The gacha system, or lottery system for people who haven't heard the term, works like this. You find a blade core, soup it up with modifiers where applicable, and crack it to bond with a new blade. Yeah, you're not stuck with your main partner all game, you gotta diversify. Def not helping Rex beat the harem allegations, bro.
And where did those allegations come from anyway? The fact of the matter is that Rex is surrounded by women, and most of the blades you pull are women.
So we worked with a large number of character designers on Xenoblade Chronicles 2, and when giving our requests for character designs to them, we didn't go so far as to specify whether we wanted male characters, female characters, or beasts. Instead, we gave them elements of those characters and how we would like them to perform in battle. We left it up to the designers at that point, and we ended up with a lot of females, and I think that's the best answer I can give.
Could this be a big titty conspiracy? And so, plausible deniability established.
You don't unlock quality field skills until very late in the game once you've collected enough rare blade cores. Buy now at the DLC shop and collected enough party members to increase your chances of unlocking rare blades. Every time you get a rare blade, the character who bonded with it has a lower chance to get another. Some of these rare blades have useful field skills and some have crap. Some of their skills are so rare it's almost impossible to get high enough field skill ranks among all collected blades to actually traverse secret ways and paths. I barely passed some of the main story blockades, and that's using all available DLC cores because the Torna edition gives it for free. But you can engage with the Merc system, this passive quest dealie to send blades out on missions that take real time to complete. Yes, but they grant field skills, and I didn't use it nearly enough. Mostly because my head was spinning and I wanted to get on with the game. You can upgrade a robotic party member as well, and she has plenty of plot-important field skills, so is it bad to admit I didn't want to use her because the other tank was cooler? What I'm getting at is, after the intro, the combat mechanics, gacha system, the field skills, the subsystems, every little thing, is that Xenoblade Chronicles 2 can be a wildly different experience between two players. If you don't take your time, you're gonna get filtered. If you invest, you're gonna reap the rewards. And there really isn't an in-between. It's kind of mind-blowing because I believe in the title's good qualities. Things like its characterization, its story payoffs, the Torna DLC. And then I look at the base game, and I see something that's demonstrably less well-cropped than the original, that takes at least 4 to 6 chapters to get interesting, a game heightening taking its level of complexity well past the original without tutorializing effectively throughout.
Pulling through the walls. This is the state of play.
A game gating its own progression behind player engagement with a facsimile of the tackiest mobile gaming system known to man and real-time menu missions. And that's not even mentioning the schlock.
Did I what? You've got a lot of nerve, you one-eyed monster.
The joke here is that Nia has a noticeably weaker insult game than the other characters.
You have to put up with more than a little nonsense to get into Xenoblade 2. And that's no insult at the people who dig it or the people who made it. Just means they're extremely powerful individuals and they carry the weight of the world on their shoulders with ease. That weight got me kneeling, bro. It's no wonder the fans who love it fight as hard as they do for it. First off, things like 80 hours long, so you're gonna have something good to say if you pulled through. But more importantly, if my favorite game were covered in targets, and I had to keep hearing that arrow thunking day after day, I'd probably pop a blood vessel myself. It's probably in the comments section now, and if we're being honest, every Xenoblade game has all kinds of crap, but most of them don't blow their load on weird weaselly microsystems dragged out over 30 hours crawling to the mid-game payoff. That's all. So let's talk about the party. If there's a Xenoblade character who most closely resembles Sora and gets hit with all the weird obnoxious attitudes cynical Western creeps blast the guy with, it's Rex. And really, you expect some of that when first impressions are everything. In the internet age where everyone's looking for the fastest take, the coveted first, I'm sensing a weak bloodline here. If the JRPG protag's wearing literal clown shoes, or whatever this triple-belted monstrosity is, that's gonna happen. But if you play for literally 5 seconds, you realize it's a diving suit that's directly related to his job. And Rex is supposed to look like a doof. He's a guy who stumbles into the plot by accident. It's honestly fine. And his personality's solid. I don't trust people who don't like characters that never did anything wrong. Rex isn't insufferably twee or anything either. He's a little inexperienced, but he's about the most polite, well-adjusted kid you could ask for, especially when he's surrounded by jubbly anime girls. Rex starts as a DPS character with traditional positionals, Shulk 2.0, only he can heal by dropping health potions on his grappling hook move. Rex's blade, at least until you've gotcha'd up a full squad, is Pyra and eventually Mithra. These characters are the subject of a lot of criticism that I don't want to detract from because I do think it's fair and valid to say that they're designed specifically to catch a certain kind of attention. It doesn't take more than a simple scratch of the surface to show, numerically even, that these characters are pretty popular in certain places. Really, I think with this game's optics and getting launched in the West, you're gonna need some kind of sell. You'd have to ignore basically the entire game to say it's purely bad faith pandering. One of the major narrative through lines is that appearances belie the reality of a thing, and that conceit transcends gameplay, story, characterization, even presentation. I happen to think that leading with Pyra, a soft personality whom Rex quickly falls for, and introducing Mithra later on, this prickly, impossible, and deeply sympathetic personality, after the Torna DLC anyway, is a brilliant bit of storytelling. We think we're getting Pyra's total opposite, someone brash and confident, a trope, but we learn over time that she's too insecure and damaged to feel comfortable getting close to someone, even her own driver, and uses Pyra to front for her, smooth things out in her place. And Rex learns that you have to meet people where they're at. No relationship, friends or otherwise, is completely smooth sailing. Unfortunately, these two are major spoiler territory, so we'll catch up with them later. Nia's the designated healer, and her accent makes me cry.
Normally, if a blade or its driver dies, it'll just go back to being a core crystal.
Laughing, that is. In a good way. This stuff's great, the raw contrast of it all. Nia chafes with Rex's naivete and general sense of justice, acting as a voice of pragmatism. Her blade fills a mildly softer voice of reason role, but otherwise they're not much to talk about, at least without getting into mega spoilers. Now Torna. Torna is a character that you can farm engagement on your YouTube video with by casually mentioning that he deliberately programmed the world's first artificial blade to serve him dressed in a maid outfit while being generally minor coded. Wow! Torna is weird and works decidedly worse in the West, kind of like how they changed the final Anna support dialogue in Fire Emblem Engage during localization. Kind of like how Lyn has revealing outfits in the Japanese version of Xenoblade X, but not in the West. But the good news is, his major plot relevance wraps up pretty early with decent cutscenes to boot, and he shuts up for most of the game afterwards, so if you hate him, no worries. His tanking duties can easily be compensated for by the infinitely cooler Morag, and if you like him, well, his His blade Poppy remains pretty relevant throughout the runtime, even if she's weird and childlike. She ends up contributing in significant ways to the group dynamic, moving forward as a bastion of pure empathy and support. Morag helps round out the more colorful members of the cast. Hailing from a background of rank and duty, and unfortunately a super cop, Morag and her blade Bridget begin as antagonists that end up helping you root out corruption in her kingdom and eventually the world. Like most recruitable hater types, Vegeta and his ilk, Morag needs a show of force to join and proof of Rex's exemplar status. She needs to see him doing the work for the future they both believe in to come around. I expect nothing less from a character with her background, so she works just fine. That leaves only one. And the bards would spin their deeds into myth on winds of silken song. Zeke's the best. I think people find characters like this impossible to believe, and they kind of are, but when he's doing his bit, I'm having fun. I don't think you can like Xenoblade Chronicles and dislike Zeke. I mean, he's played as a minor antagonist and turns into an ally, so it's kind of like recruiting Jesse and James into your party wholesale. You think I'm turning that down? Zeke's the other DPS character, and it makes sense you'd get him late. The plot revolves around the Aegis, so like with Xenoblade 1, they probably want to incentivize keeping Rex around. Unfortunately, I like Zeke anyway, so Rex had to sit out for most of the run after. Zeke's chief value is underlining one of the key consequences of the world building. When you create a race of synthetic beings that bond to organic ones and function anywhere from partner to slave, well, it begs asking how blades are treated in society. And the answer is pretty badly by more than enough people, but by now you've noticed that blades can be animalian, but most are humanoids, and the higher ranked ones have pretty attractive features. Unfortunately, the nature of this arrangement isn't thoroughly inquired into by the plot. It's taken as reality, kind of like Pokemon pre-N, but Zeke helps demonstrate through his relationship, serving something as a model for Rex. The true bonds come from a place of altruism, giving first. I've been talking about blades a lot, but unless you've played, you're probably wondering how they actually factor into combat, so it's time for the big Xenoblade Chronicles 2 combat breakdown shakedown time. Combat is slow unless you're canceling auto attacks. It's got some interesting pacing, especially coming off X, meandering around dudes to land back attacks, sluggishly strafing for a side strike. Man, can a brother get a jump back? You dump arts and build them back up, and occasionally sync up with your blade, who accompanies you into battle with their own set of AI-handled arts. By sync up, I mean you'll have to land a quick time event a la Xenoblade X to get a special move. Add to this a team attack system reminiscent of the original game, but complicated, with elemental orbs you have to crack to get more attacks in. Okay, cool, it's nerdy, it's good. Newcomers will find the system frustrating because, honestly, no matter how fast you auto-attack cancel, if you just use your main blade, there will be plenty of downtime. It's critical, absolutely necessary to swap between gacha-acquired blades so you can weave effectively between dumping cooldowns on one and moving on to another. The combat just doesn't flow without making use of at least 2 blades, and preferably 3. That means the combat tends to feel crummy until late in the story, and even worse, you'll need to be deep into the gacha nonsense and massively invested in training your blades one by one, getting them equipped with accessories, leveling their arts, unlocking and plugging points into their individual talent trees. There are a lot of dials to turn. More than the original, more than X. It's a real knob type game, you feel me? Notch and twist coded experience. Real build up and bust business. I am severely unwell. I am a person who's been playing Xenoblade for 4 months. I think the real piss off with the combat, alongside tutorials, is that all these blades you bond with have specific roles, so your DPS character might be loaded up with all 3 of their best blades, and it'll be DPS, healer, and tank, respectively. A full list of roles. I don't know how else to say this, but that's the most unintuitive setup I've ever seen. The game's trying to tell you that the roles don't really matter, regardless of if Rex is traditionally a DPS, but if you've played the other 2, roles absolutely matter to you, at least when it comes to tanks and DPS, so trying to wrap your head around your primary tank swapping to DPS mid-combat, or your healer swapping to tank, kinda drove me insane early game. It kept me avoiding blades on my allies in case they screwed around with the wrong blade mid-battle, which they always did. It's infuriating, but this entire problem is more or less irrelevant if you keep your blades competitively leveled and trust the system. Or get on YouTube and bring your notepad. Let's try making sense of this story. Like with everything about the base game, it's not that the story is incomprehensible, just that it ups noun usage and introduces a more elaborate conflict spanning several factions, housing sub-conflicts. So, I brought my notepad, where's yours?
Developer interviews really only enhance these games. For example, this one in particular was very different at conception.
At first, the team tried to make a type of story setting in which the Blade characters would look like Ultraman, but as they couldn't put a 40-meter tall giant on the screen, they ended up reducing their sizes to be around the same as humans. They also made the story that depicts a hero and heroine, thus connecting it to the keywords boy meets girl and juvenile.
Now imagine that character from earlier, but 40 feet tall. I'm thinking someone on the team got a thing for massive Dobanhankaros. Enormous Dahunkabankalus!
We watch a Titan die in the intro, and it's an important point to make early. The actual land masses that the sentient races live on are ancient. They're not immortal. Titans being the land means there's a very finite amount to settle and colonize, so inter-Titan conflicts are always boiling under the surface. Two nations in particular, Mor Ardain and Araya, are at the brink of war over the dying Ardanian Titan, which underpins the events of the story. And I explained the intro with Rex awakening Pyra and all that, but the player is always aware that the end game is Elysium, at the top of the world tree. Why is it always a world tree? Maybe we can get a world reef or a fungus or a world rock. The escape from Malos early on only happens because Nia defects from Malos' organization, Torna. Specifically because she's asked to murder a person, and because Azurta, the small titan Rex rides on, assists at the cost of his life. Or so we're led to believe until he pops out as a baby at the crash site. Couldn't resist having the cute animal companion. I swear this is intentional. He even seems to know Pyra, so slip that in your pocket real quick. After a bunch of very funny moments featuring Tora, a rescue, and an escape, the party's eventually led to the World Tree, but they're beaten back by some gigantic defense worm and swallowed by the Orion Titan, which is no different than the Bionis, thankfully. You can walk on through without getting digested. You meet Vandam, this person, and another member of Torna, this guy Akos, tries to hunt you down, but gets driven back thanks to Vandam. So there's two more characters to float around in your head. I know, it's all very simple. You also meet a turtle called Turturs. I don't think he appears ever again, which means it predominantly exists to make the Zeke character quirkier than he already is. But since the game isn't confident handing us another character, the plot hooks him off stage. Later, after a minor kidnapping in the capital, you're forced to fight Akos again, but this time, he brought the other Aegis, Malos. While you're getting your ass beat, Vandam stabs himself, creating a direct link with his blade and granting him more power than usual, I guess. I don't know, I can really vividly imagine half the audience interested and the other half glazing over right about here. It gets tiring having to make allowances for every little thing. But sure, Vandam's sacrifice causes Pyra to reawaken her other form, Mithra, and you trounce both Akos and Malos. Now this is where the story hits a lull, and it's partly why people dunk on the pacing a bit. Up until this point, we've been fed a lot of information and juggled a lot of characters, and now the plot's taking us back to Tora, the most morally bankrupt and otherwise reprehensible person in the party, cute hero worship of Rex or not, so we can watch a slap fight between a maid robot and a child robot while introducing even more Torna goons and yet another mysterious blade to guide us through yet another segment. It's a lot. Epic in scope for sure, definitely ticking that box for people. I think Mithra carries this segment a bit. She's abrasive and short, and you're not meant to like her right away. It introduces some tension into the party beyond like Nia berating Rex for having hopes and dreams and being kind.
I don't know if you're stupid or
you probably shit in a box. The party is summoned by Amalthus, basically the Pope, so they go. On the way, Zeke shows up for a third time and reveals that he was only kidding about trying to kill us earlier. It was a prank! When he murdered my entire team with a gigantic lightning sword, he was fooling around. What a card! What an ultramarine! Well, he's dead now, I guess. War breaks out between Mor Ardain and Araya thanks to Torna's meddling. We head to stop the conflict, and Jin kills the blade from earlier. Jin makes himself the scariest villain very early and leads the player to wonder why. It's so obvious that causing strife and destroying the world is meaninglessly cruel. So what happened to this guy? Thankfully, the Praetorium intervenes to prevent further conflict, and we get a lands meet scene, just without any interaction or head chopping. Mega spoiler moment. Bana shows up one last time to kill everyone, and mortally wounds Emperor Nile, who defends the party. Everyone leaves to fight back some enemies while Nia stays behind, revealing a core crystal and healing the kid. I swear everyone's a bomb. Every character gotta have something. You can't just be cool on their own, huh? The party is sent to Zeke's home, Tantal, to retrieve something called the Omega Fetter. That might be a word? Which can control the worm guarding the world tree, I guess. Unfortunately, they're locked up by the king, who'd rather just outright die to Malos apparently, and in attempting to rescue Pyra from his goons, Poppy inadvertently destroys what we came for, which sends the Tantalese Titan into a downward spiral. Torna shows up and we get our asses kicked, only for Pyra to threaten self-annihilation if they don't let us go. So we lose her and hit a huge emotional low point, and the game finally got a tear from me. At this point, I can't tell if it was the knowledge that I was past the lull, witnessing the culmination of an incredible series of story beats, or developing Stockholm Syndrome, but it got me. Rex is such a kind and positive character that seeing him in any kind of miserable state is emotionally jarring. But you can't hate the kid. He literally is his bond with Pyra. Without her, he can't fight. If she dies, he dies. Of course it feels hopeless, but this is a Xenoblade game, and if he doesn't find hope, derive strength from his friends, this plot's not wrapping anytime soon. So, the game takes time to work through party member stuff while they search for another Aegis sword to replace the one Jin shattered. On the way, Zeke explains that part of his partner's core crystal is lodged in his chest, making him a blade eater as a result of an experiment Amalthus performed on the pair. In the same segment, Nia reveals that she's a flesh eater with a pretty horrendous past that isn't materially relevant to the plot, but to cut it short, she's been living as a human, deeply ashamed of her true nature, and finally feels free to be herself. I'm not saying who asked, I'm more like, Rex lost his harem and immediately got a new sword girl to swing around, bro. Can this man take an L? Can he lose for real just once? With a new sword, a new blade, and newly forged resolve, the party heads to the World Tree to battle Malos. A lot of people like to meme about Malos just hanging around all the time, but I think it makes perfect sense in context. He may have the ultimate goal of destroying the world, that's his purpose, but he's the strongest being on the planet and bored to tears by everything around him. He's been hanging around on Allrest for at least 500 years, and he's probably seen just about everything. Bro's just waiting for the next great YouTuber or anime media in general to feel something again. And by that I mean a physical challenge to make doing his job fun. Also, he pulls out a Monado. I don't even want to know. Jin and Malos join up, and in yet another moment of transformative desperation, Mithra's true form, Numa, levels the playing field again while Numa calls in her planet-orbiting mech, Siren, to battle the worm, causing everyone to plummet into the depths below. What if I told you that this entire fantastical world was built on basically the human world, and gooey tar monsters dropped human ID cards? Ew. We are entering Xenoblade Chronicles territory, folks. There is some serious xenography occurring at this time. Amalthus tries to stop the party. He's a blade eater because he transplanted that priestess blade's core crystal into himself. He calls Titans to join the fray, Torna schlubs arrive, and some explode. Back inside, we battle with Jin at the last plot pit stop. The remaining Torna goons join up and die as Amalthus also jumps in. Jin and the party finish Amalthus, and Jin dies as a result. I want to take some time to talk about Jin and his actions, but it'll be better saved for the Torna segment, so let me hold that for now. In search of Malos, the players stumble into Elysium, exactly what you'd expect in a game like Xenoblade. Anyway, yeah, we do Christ allegories, yeah, we got the Bible, but we also kill Jod, bro. We wish for worlds without gods, and when the party gets to heaven, it actually sucks. Almost like the right place to make a heaven is down on Earth, but the conditions make it impossible. Considering this world is presided over by a deity, godly skill issue TBH. We're led astray briefly with horrific visions.
I'm gonna have to ask you two to stop cooking so white.
Until we muster our courage and confront the architect. He says a lot and demystifies enormous in-universe mysteries, basically admits that mankind was born from titans, which, so they're doing the Bionis again, kind of? And life is cyclical and humans are treated as animalian. Fair enough. And blades exist how they do, all anime and weird-like, because they're artificial recreations of data mimicking the past life on the planet before it was destroyed accidentally by the architect. Which is why this sleepy girl has a giant polar bear friend. Who can say that that is not in our real world? After all this verbiage, Malos gets in a big robot and you know the story. Eventually, the World Tree and the space installation start to crumble. Numa stays behind to pilot the mech and blow up falling chunks to save the land below. She says goodbye and grants Rex the complete core crystal so he can live on his own. Azurta turning into his full Titan self isn't too far off from the air taxi eagles in The Lord of the Rings, but shut up, dweeb. Unfortunately, the land below is ravaged, with most Titans annihilated. Guys, can we go one single game without a genocide? As the remaining Titans merge into a great green landmass, Pyra and Mithra suddenly appear, apparently granted individual bodies. And Rex gets his goddamn harem. Okay, penis game. It probably sounds like I hate this game, but I don't, and I need to make it clear. There are two kinds of storytellers. People who write such that the premise of a story is the bulk of the story, and people who write drama and conflict that comprises the story regardless of the premise, or merely informed by the premise. Obviously, it's not that clean cut with writers, but the Xenoblade Chronicles team is very clearly interested in selling fantastical worlds and big, sweeping ideas. If you don't buy the premise or just think it's kind of neat, you won't resonate. Filtered. If you think it's complex and beautiful, something to aspire to as a writer even, you're gonna embrace the thing. But Xenoblade Chronicles is a video game, and the traditions, values, and complications of game writing are their own, distinct from novel writing, for example. If you're writing a game, you should strive to sell the player on a world, or at least a fun space to, interact with, taking mitigating factors into consideration like discrepancies in the translation and voice acting decisions. I think it's fine. A little high-minded, but still presenting an interesting premise, characters with genuine, sympathetic struggles, and powerful payoffs. It's opulently directed, not unlike the first, and it's got a whole universe to fit into. Can't go shying away from what's already built now. In that sense, I think I'd appreciate 2 more if I did have the full picture going in, if I ran it again with everything I now know. It's such a uniquely Xenoblade problem, and especially in 3, that the player's appreciation grows once the veil is lifted in the final moments. When you understand the depth and complexity of the construction, you miss so much just playing raw without the full context of the premise. 2 in particular keys into the notion that things are more complex than they first appear, that people aren't what they seem, and that everyone's motivated by their own experiences, which are fundamentally impossible to understand without building some kind of connection. It believes that so much, we get Torna as a DLC product. That makes 2 something everyone should play if they're looking to brush up on their moral fiber, I guess. Its messages are valuable. It just happens to take some kind of time getting there, and it's not easy. I wouldn't be shocked if the relative complexity of the systems was meant as a mimetic design implementation to demonstrate that very Xenoblade idea that human will triumphs over all. So let's take a look at 2, if it were made for regular people. Xenoblade Chronicles 2 Torna. Torna my heart out. Unlike previous DLCs, Torna's getting its own section, so I hope that tips you off a little. I may have problems with Xenoblade 2, like any other game, but Torna's unique for fixing almost every single gameplay gripe I have. It's brilliant, genuinely exciting to play, and for a fraction of the time investment. The biggest problem with Torna is you can't buy it on a separate cart. I mean you can, but it's not cheap, and that's brutal because I can't recommend any of these games in good faith to most people. Not because they're bad experiences, but because their time sinks, and I don't feel comfortable pushing that kind of responsibility on a working adult, especially when most of them actually require the full playtime to hit the payoffs. Torna opens with Laura and Jin, a driver and blade duo surviving in the wilderness. You'll quickly meet up with Mithra and Adam, the legendary hero mentioned throughout the second game with his trusty Aegis, alongside the young Emperor of Mor Ardain and his blade, Brigid. According to the developers, Torna was effectively a repackaging of cut content that originally fit between the 7th and 8th chapters, and it's hard to convey meaningfully how interesting it is to load up into a fresh vision of the past to meet heroes and play as someone I knew as an antagonist first. And the game kicks ass, too. Unlike the base experience, which features endless number tweaking for your goddamn gotcha blades, beings you dragged screaming out of the ether to make servile, Torna gives us real partners and a complete combat experience, no strings attached. Every driver has access to 2 blades. Laura has Jin for DPS and Hayes for heals. Adam has Mithra for damage and Minoth for damage also. That leaves Emperor Nile with 2 tank blades. okay, now no one can switch off to something I didn't ask for. But like we established in the previous section, role isn't overly important, and really it means your team is damage focused anyway. The key is your drivers and your blades are both controllable. You swap between them with a button press, not unlike swapping characters in MVC3. Canceling auto attacks into arts increases damage, and auto attacks work off cooldown time, so the basic flow is lively and even beat-like. Auto attack, cancel, auto attack, cancel, auto attack, cancel, auto attack, swap, start fresh. It's a much more urgent and engaging system for a JRPG. Incentivizes you to move away from the endless canceled auto attacks. This actually has a pulse. I could cry. It's not that 2 doesn't do this, mind you, and it might be the reduced scope, but the beat is palpable now. Imagine getting a second shot at making your combat system, and you make it smarter. The framework isn't just playing a partnership or incorporating partnership, it is partnership. It's reached the platonic ideal of the concept. That's not just a ludonarrative harmony, bro. That's a ludonarrative embodiment. That's peak. Oh, but Torna's not finished. Traversing the world isn't much different than before. Field skills are still present, but you only got them blades, so it's not an issue anymore. I can't tell you how frustrating it was. Not even just the farming. It was trawling through the menus to find which blades had which skill, because by late game they're falling out of your pockets, and having to go through the whole de-equip, re-equip rigmarole to hopefully unlock one single corridor so you can go through the menus again to get back to your favorite setup, because 10 times out of 10, the skills weren't on your good blades. I mean, I think I just demonstrated how annoying that is. So anyway, that's not even a factor in Torna. You're just free to enjoy the world and engage with enemies through this sick-ass revamped combat system. You hit a field skill check, you're investing in the blades you've been investing with this entire time, not having to stop and invest in some garbage blade that you don't want to level that particular field skill, or some mission menu junk. The environments are just as lush and colorful, maybe a little less contrasty, but that's important. Some of them tones blazed off the screen in the original. Some people can't even look at my thumbnails without headaches on account of the saturation, so I'm gonna unfairly chalk another one here on Torna's side. Not that it's a competition, just a little sales pitch. And I gotta be real quiet here, so listen close. You're tired of questing. The sun dips far over the horizon, and darkness falls. It's time to make camp. At the campsite, a menu pops up letting each individual character, human or blade, craft something, make charms, make food, the little things. This legitimately rivals partner combat for peak design. Yes, it's just a pouch item and accessory crafting submenu, but it's contextualized. In this game about working together, driver and blade, as partners contributing meaningfully to the group. It's actually 10 out of 10 material. They brought it back in 3 to a lesser extent, because it's basically perfect. Everyone should know this feeling. Like you've got one single useless skill and you can't do anything else worthwhile. Or maybe you're good at a lot of little things, but don't seem to have any real talents, you know, jack of all trades, master of none. Maybe your talent, the thing you vibe with, has no real market value. Torna acknowledges that people have weird quirks and interests, and while every character can contribute to combat, not everyone would have equally valuable skills in the real world. Bridget's perfumes might be artisanal, for all I know, but cooking's a universal necessity. And yet, none of that worth scaling matters, because all of these skills are afforded equal dignity by the game, their own menus for crafting items that all have a purpose. It's such an individually validating and positive message, the kind I think doesn't get propped up half as prominently as it deserves. I don't really care about your crazy plot points and twists, not really. These are the low vibrations that resonate. These are the human elements. Pouch items were weird in the original because, while they were powerful temporary buffs, they were sold like this. Yeah, real enticing, just like everything else. But I'm incentivized to make and use these things and engage with the world for the necessary ingredients. These systems lock together so effortlessly, a perfect microcosm of the series' genius. I do want to mention the major gameplay issue with Torna that haunts discussion. Yeah, I kill my babies too. It's only fair if I'm swinging it too. Torna gates progression behind side quest completion. At first, you'll be playing along thinking everything's fine, but in the last quarter of the story, the game grinds to a halt so you can help people all across the land. Only it's not sold like that. You'll hit a wall and get a pop-up, and there it is. You must complete 40 quests to continue. Surreal prank, Monolithsoft. Transcendental humor. Now, I got paid to play Xenoblade. It was a Patreon goal, so I like to stick things out unless they're really awful. I happen to like the experience and adore these characters, so I pulled through just fine. All told, I took 2 play sessions to handle the side quest grind, and you could easily take longer and pace yourself. A lot of them are quick, easily found, and some are finished before they even start. Just small collectible turn-ins, so no, I don't think it makes the game garbage. Not even close. In the end, I spent infinitely less time on this entry because it's just that small, and 0 time grinding. And compared to what every single Xenoblade game put me through, in one way or another, I don't see gating progression behind some simple side quests as meaningfully different than the excruciating first half of 2, or the endless MMO grind of X, or even the back-to-back late-game zones of 1. Every one of these titles is a thief of time. Torna's just honest about it. And frankly, being made to go through these to hit story payoffs that I really wanted to see got me more in tune with the world than almost any of the other titles. Side quests kinda suck by design. In JRPGs, the fundamental health of the world is often compromised, and asshat characters manage to find time to dick around in stinky backwaters and nameless dust bowls to save cats, and deliver letters and collect boar asses or whatever. And you really feel it in Torna too. The world's literally counting down the days until Malos launches an attack on the titular Golden Country. But I think it's essential to the message, even the identity of Xenoblade Chronicles. Yeah, plenty of RPGs are about gathering forces to beat back the darkness, and in Torna, a game that powerfully conveys the weight and value of friendship, partnership, camaraderie, love, togetherness with concrete examples, and flawless gameplay tie-ins, it's more appropriate than ever to make the player appreciate the setting and the stakes. And it really only makes the thing more heartbreaking when you get there. Really just shreds you from the inside. I mean, really, if Nier got to do what it did at the end, I think Torna can do it too. Let's take a walk through the plot. Torna opens 500 years before the events of Xenoblade Chronicles 2. It gives the setting a mystique you might not expect from environments we've seen before. It's also worth distinguishing, very late I know, that blades are weapons in universe, not a race of people properly. They're thought of primarily as tools or partners depending on the character of the driver. Blades have no memories of their past lives, so if their driver were to die for any reason, they'd reset until someone else bonds with them. That's relevant to Jin, specifically. Amalthus may be a villain in the main plot, but he starts as a young man climbing the world tree and finding no architect in heaven at all. Only 2 core crystals, the Aegises. He bonds with only one, Malos, and because these blades were found in basically Eden, they're seen as embodiments of the architect's will. However, Amalthus' horrible personality rubs off on Malos, and he comes to see the world as worthy of destruction. Hey Malos, bro, you tried Korean food? A little sundubu jjigae? Want to try bubble tea, bro? Another driver is sought to wield the other Aegis, so we get Prince Adam of Torna. But since he's afraid of its power, Mithra, the watered-down version of Numa, manifests instead. The will of the driver affects the blade, the same way the will of the wielder affects the Minato. I guess you could say that will is everything in universe. That's a lot of setup, but beyond that, we also have to consider Jin and Laura. Jin was a blade of Tornan royalty stolen by a petty criminal, and at some point Laura was nearly attacked by the guy, but Jin stepped up to protect her and they bonded. So now it's me and my 6'2", never-aging hot anime boyfriend! They've been together a long time, which justifies the incredible partner combat you start with. It's especially powerful that their style, passing the blade between each other, evolved out of a lack of money. They never found another sword. They couldn't steal a sword, they just worked really well together. It's a little insane conceptually, but sweet. Malos is a threat even in this time, and the party learns of his plan to attack the Tornan capital. When confronted, he reveals that his true goal was to expose the core of the Tornan Titan. He attacks the capital during the fight with the party, which sends Mithra into a rage, in possibly the strongest scene in a Xenoblade game. Mithra clashes with Malos and unleashes so much raw energy that she kills Hugo and the Tornan Titan, accidentally a genocide, and receding so far into herself in guilt and horror she creates Pyra. It's why Mithra's like that in the main game. She's deeply afraid of the consequences of wielding her power and fundamentally incapable of being herself naturally. She's maybe the most sympathetic character in the game, a being born as a weapon, used as a weapon, treated well, mind you, but cruelly incapable of escaping her own artificial humanity. A sword can kill guiltlessly, but not if that sword is sentient. Now make that sword a bomber jet armed with nuclear warheads. After a sad goodbye, Amalthus succeeds to the heights of the Praetorium and orders an attack on Adam, and Laura is killed unintentionally. Jin, incapable of reconciling the loss of his memories of Laura, breaks the flesh-eater taboo and consumes her heart to keep his precious memories at the cost of his immortality. Jin, enraged by the futility of mortal struggle, seeks to kill the architect and destroy the world for the evil that both enable. He partners with Malos and forms Torna. Torna, the game not the organization, gets some of its kick from the context of the main title. Without it, you wouldn't get the same gut punch watching Mithra lose herself. You wouldn't care about Adam because he'd just be another smiley Xenoblade protag. You wouldn't think much of Jin in general outside of what's presented in-game. Jin is kind of the anti-Xeno protag. Like, forget Malos. What that character does on screen is effectively a short-sighted condemnation of humanity, born of the utter joylessness of deriving self-worth primarily from strength and duty, and never needing to achieve beyond that. It's believable, but, you know, just another outcome of circumstances. Jin, on the other hand, is what happens when a Xenoblade protag arc goes wrong. He's got everything he needs, a meaningful existence standing astride his partner Laura, and her totally unjust death drives everything good and even human out of him. And while that might seem ridiculous for someone who should understand the value of humanity, it's dangerously easy to slide into despair when tragedy strikes and nobody is there to catch you. Alone, viewing everything as fundamentally farcical, Jin is tortured from within, abandoning regular society after breaking a serious taboo, and ultimately gets recruited by Malos. That's who extended an arm, someone with the absolute worst intentions. While his story is depressing, it perfectly captures an unexplored potential in the universe. What if these characters, these friends, fail? Unfortunately, Xenoblade 2 is another half of one. Both universes ended up extremely relevant to the series' third entry. What happens when you create two immaculate worlds and experiment with another for fun? What does that look like in the end? What's all this now? What has happened here?
That is the flame clock. Your life force is now bound to the flame, and I'm going to dump so much exposition you'll die before ever playing the game.
No. Nope. No, I don't really care for any of that kind of thing.
So you gonna shoot me now, or?
No, I'm going to edit you being vacuumed up and shredded eventually by an animated sprite of Samsho character Tam Tam. That seems suitably whimsical.
Xenoblade Chronicles 3. Version 1.2.1 is the Xenoblade Chronicles 3 of Xenoblade Chronicles. I wrote down meticulous notes for this particular title after the fact, and I feel like I need to address something. The raw volume of notes I have about the world itself, the rules of the setting, the history of the central conflict, and how the universe's basic mechanics work, there's more of that than what actually happens on screen. I don't know what to do with that information. Should I dump it? What the hell? You'd have to beat the game once to appreciate most of anything on screen that isn't strictly between characters. It's kind of infuriating. So I think I'm gonna give the short version and leave the full dump for later. But man, Tetsuya Takahashi and co. love brain splurging. Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is a hell of a lot of game, a lot to parse. It's easily the most complex and bizarre premise for the series, and the good news is, they've learned some things. Xenoblade Chronicles is fun to play sometimes, but most titles don't push snappy, responsive, interactive play first, and 3 here's got you covered, even if the jump is more Xenoblade 2 than Xenoblade X. The party matters. In fact, I'd say the party is more important than the story, the actual beats, at least to Xenoblade writ large, and we get plenty of conversational tidbits about everyone.
Gasp! Food is entirely missing! Gasp! Oh, the food's completely gone!
That's not a meme, there's a reason for that. I checked. The only material things hampering this entry, if we're being honest, are the same baseline issues you'd find in any of these titles, so no worries if you got this far. Things like playtime bloat, or, you know, peak video games according to others. Oh, and presenting a stunning world on hardware literally groaning under the weight of hardware limitations. It's extremely easy to look at modern games and say, that's ugly, or this is poorly optimized, without understanding anything that goes into them, so I'm gonna call Xenoblade Chronicles 3 gorgeous regardless. It's got a vision, but it's on the Switch, and if that's what keeps Monolithsoft making games on reasonable hours, Fine. We intro with the conflict from Fire Emblem Fates. White-armored, not Japanese people fighting black-armored, not Europeans. I feel like if I were 10% more evil, I could find a horrendous joke to make about this situation, but I eat my celery, so my purity is high. This is going to take a bit to explain. The people of these warring nations live 10 years tops. They're shot out somehow around their teens, by the way. If they die in battle, the ether that makes up their body and souls is released back into the world by an offseer, basically someone with a little flute who plays for corpses. They wage war not for land, but to fill up their flame clocks, which visually indicate how much time they have left to live. And these clocks are connected with their colony, so people are incentivized to work towards mutual survival by fighting. Combat is everything to these people. The question of, do we live to fight or fight to live, comes up more than once. Various ethnicities of recognizable Xenoblade Chronicles origin are born into colonies and intermingle constantly, so racism is effectively written out of the fantasy work, something I'm pretty sure most D&D authors can't even imagine pulling without crying first on Twitter, but which the Xenoblade Chronicles authors pull off effortlessly. In case you're wondering if this all sounds too artificial, too constructed, well, I'm sure you'll be extremely unsurprised to find out that there's a reason, but it's a spoiler, so. And yeah, it's high concept, a lot to sell someone on. Bro, look at how low your ears are. But because it's such a specific and intricate setup, it gets the player wondering how these pieces are gonna fit together, what kind of story they'll tell. Conceptual work can be fun, so let's roll with it. Noah, Lands, Uni, and Riku are sent off to capture some tech when they're intercepted by an enemy squadron consisting of Mio, Senna, Taion, and Manana. And well, they're in all the promotional material, so this is the party. We get confirmation that regular humans who actually age normally do exist, but no one present has ever seen one. Then some kind of Evangelion spawn attacks the party, causing Noah and Mio to fuse. I'm gonna be really real for a moment. This is easily the hardest story to get into for people steeped too strongly in academic writing and film conventions. The sheer level of, oh okay, you have to do is a pretty huge ask, and people have been trained in both writerly and film circles by the critics they watch and the general meta of cynicism surrounding media to laugh stuff like this off. And even without that context, in the West, it's very easy to find stuff like this laughable. It's why you have Video Game Donkey doing hit piece after hit piece on JRPGs, because why engage with something earnestly and curiously if you've been trained to cringe and sneer and clip the thing for fun? So I'm not going to blame you personally if you feel compelled to be cynical about everything. What I'm going to do instead is remind you that 50 Shades of Grey's author repackaged Twilight fanfiction and made $1 million. You can work your ass off, die, and get recognized after the fact, or you can write something that shouldn't even be viable for public consumption and strike it rich. So stop giving a shit about what's good on paper. You beat back the mech dude and every party member is paired off. Noah and Mio, Senna and Lands, Taion and Uni, and like Xenoblade 2, there's an element of, oh, did Jordan Peterson write this shit? I guess everyone's getting a plot-mandated girlfriend, but it runs with the premise pretty respectfully. Never really gets creepy. Noah and Mio bond over their duty as overseers. Lands and Senna are workout buddies. Uni and Taion have a dynamic. With the power they're granted, the so-called Ouroboros, they're free to their flame clocks and allowed to live without having to kill, except that they're suddenly seen as enemies by their respective colonies and made to cling to each other for survival, moving forward in a world that's openly hostile to them. I think that's pretty fertile ground for a deeply meaningful story. Literally anyone who's ever been an outcast in any context can get something out of the plot. So you're off to find a safe haven. You'll bounce from colony to colony, traveling all over the world, meeting diverse people from interesting walks of life. It's a Xenoblade Chronicles game. It's not switching things up this late in the series, but it has some buy-in features I really appreciate. If you don't like the sound of the thing so far, I can't blame you. But the class system kicks ass. Unlocking new jobs, mixing skills. It's like they took lessons from every game and grafted on elements from Final Fantasy Tactics. That's like the opposite of a Chimera or Frankenstein's monster or whatever other unholy amalgam, bro. That is a being of myth. One thing 3 does to hammer home the point about the Ouroboros here having the privilege to make choices is through little conflicts you're allowed to jump into or ignore entirely. It doesn't often matter from a story perspective, retrospective, and really, it turns into, do I want EXP or upgrade materials, more often than it probably should, but an attempt was made. While you're traversing the worlds, you'll come across many different colonies, and they're often commanded by characters whose class you can inherit. The inheritor, a single member of your party, usually whoever makes the most sense for that given class, can then unlock the class for other party members through use, exposure. Kinda like osmosis, it gets you into the world, actually excited to do side content because, new ways to play your characters in JRPGs, so classes, are kind of the ultimate player incentives. That means you power up by learning about other people, other cultures, people the game initially introduces to you as deluded, quirky, or strange. I don't think I need to illustrate why that's an important point to make regarding the real world, and how brilliant it is to funnel the player naturally into that understanding. And how is the world itself? What's cool? Oh my god. I didn't know the game was going to be good. Following the other titles isn't easy, but the team did well, varying the environments and the challenges they pose. You have to unlock field skills via side quests like rail grinding and dune walking to pass through every area unimpeded. And like I said in the beginning, it's a fantastical setting constrained by the tech. I should have busted out the PC edition for this thing. Can you imagine? The scale is palpable zone by zone. You feel exactly how you should in these games, a part of the world. Another animal. Think about the way old JRPGs had players enter the overworld, and the way their representational sprite towered over everything, like a titan or something. And yeah, that was a limitation of the tech as well, but the feeling of being no different than any other life on the planet, despite your hero's status, and especially in Xenoblade Chronicles games, is ambrosial. If you're gonna change the world, it's gonna come about through mastery and understanding, not just having the best number and the best setup. These are just little feelings I have playing these games, but goddamn, is Xenoblade good at producing them? And I don't think it's by accident. If it isn't clear by now, the designers are meticulous. The director knows what he wants out of these titles. You don't just base an entire game in like Jungian psych among many, many others and not have opinions on every element of design. I've managed to avoid talking about unique monsters and boss monsters up until this point. I'm sure we all remember the first time our whole squad was obliterated by like a really big monkey, and that's just part of the world's flavor. 3 picks up and runs with the idea, giving us a fairly consistent stream of pit boss rare enemies, or elite monsters that can be challenged for great rewards. It's particularly good for a game with such an open class system, letting the player take their team's temperature at any point, organically. Side quests factor pretty heavily into the title, just like you'd expect. You can skate on by just doing colony quests for new classes, but a lot of the most impactful writing is tied up in small diversions. It's hard to describe in a clean-cut way that'll convey the importance, especially in a game this long, but the setting is particular enough that the writers can inject vignettes, moments of genuine beauty and world building delivered through these NPCs and their interactions with your characters. I am going to ignore the merchant's name being Shill, and we are going to have to be on the same page about that. Many are received by eavesdropping as well, like overhearing a problem and incidentally choosing to intervene, making a choice, like an Ouroboros would. You're thrust into the hero role, but find yourself swept up into it pretty organically through play incentives. It's no Xenoblade X, but neither are any of the games, and I think 3 does the best job making overland travel interesting for all the ways it's roping players in. Now, half the game's value is characters, so let's line them up. Noah's a little weird off the hop.
Noah.
He's a dutiful overseer, eternally level-headed, incredibly soft-spoken. There is for sure a reason for this, but I can't spoil. But he's also the resident swordmaster, Shulk-like, positionals and all. Plus, his sword is really suspicious. Talking roles in this title feels unnecessary on that note. Every character gets the option to swap to any known job on a whim, so healers can tank and vice versa. And I figure everyone plays around at least a little during a run, but it's worth mentioning that you can ultimately unlock super versions of the base classes by the endgame that can level up beyond other class limitations, and these characters all have fundamental stats that lead them into certain roles anyway. Lance is never gonna be the best healer, but he's great at taking hits. Mio's the dodge tank, a longtime fighter in her colony whose time is running out, and the question of her legacy in this world haunts her.
These characters are so uncanny. Are you kidding me with these burritos?
Especially because her younger self was saved by a comrade. It's a pretty realistic unpacking of the helplessness, the weightlessness of purpose that comes in the face of death. Lance is a bruv. I guess his most defining feature is that he's insatiable.
Hear that, Noah? Lance wants something a bit meatier.
Really continuing the tradition of Ryan. And sometimes in the field he'll scream,
"Whoa! Got a rare doodah right here!"
And really that makes him a contender for Character of the Year. Lance suffers with guilt over the death of a friend in childhood, and his fairly ungraceful role is a big meat shield. He's strong, but still somehow inadequate, and grapples with those feelings throughout the game. Senna is another DPS, this little girl with a giant hammer. And if your first thought is, that's anime and not, that's suspicious, and you played some of the other games, you might need to hit a remedial class. Senna, like Lance, also comes to terms with her own inadequacies, her hero worship of Mio and her lack of self-esteem. But to be fair,
I'm the girl with the gun.
yes, so true! You know, you can hit a fat crit in battle, but that doesn't make you a complete person. The healers, Uni and Tyon, naturally have their own personal baggage. In Uni's case, she sees a corpse that looks way too familiar and feels a kind of prophetic connection to it that bugs her for the rest of the game. And Tyon has a similar story to Mio in that both are suffering with guilt over a lost comrade, only in Tyon's case it manifests as extremely risk-averse behavior. Alright, the Napon. Riku exists. I don't think I've ever seen a more suspicious character in a Xenoblade game.
People and Ouroboros also not changed.
I don't think I've ever heard a more suspicious character in a Xenoblade game. He happens to have an incredibly powerful sword that can cut anything. This is left unexplained in-game, which I'm assuming means we'll find out later for a small fee of $6.99. Minena is a Napon who can cook. Minena is a top-tier Beyblade. Combat starts out feeling pretty conventional in this entry, but that's only because it starts small. Your KBash troops, Noah, Lance, and Uni, recover their cooldowns naturally, so you're made to sit and wait after popping them. Agnian characters, on the other hand, can auto-attack to cut down cooldowns. Where have I seen this before? You can freely swap to any party member at any time, and it's helpful once you've run through your available abilities. Gives you greater control over mismanaged AI healers, for example. Now, some people have a hard time with 7 dudes being on screen at any time, but it's kind of like controlling your own gang. The class system complicates things. Now there's a whole additional skill menu for cross-class skills, so if you're a swordmaster, you can load up a healer move. I am dangerously close to busting. By the end of an absolute deluge of character building, from equipment to passive abilities from other classes, to borrowed skills, to tweaking the setup of your current class's skills, you can pretty finely tune the ultimate death squad. I mean, you can break this game over your knee if you're willing to try. And no, it's not as simple as like arithmetician in FFT, but it's getting there. And I can appreciate that. By the end, you're juggling quite a bit, from the usual micromanagement of positioning and auto-attack canceling to the meter management involved in team attacks. And how about them Ava units, huh? Where them mechs? What them mechs? When you've synced up enough with your partner, you can fuse into your Ouroboros form. This power-up mode has its own skill tree, by the way.
Check out the sick new skill!
And it's not much to talk about on its own. You can just jam auto-attacks and abilities back and forth and try to hit your finisher before the timer runs out. Ouroboros interacts with team attacks too. Basically, each round of a team attack starts by picking a focus character, which adds bonuses to the round, but if you finish the round successfully and fill up this bar, you'll get another round. And if you complete 2 Ouroboros partner character rounds, you'll unlock a fusion finisher. And this is all very complex, but the point is that the game rewards you for working together effectively in team attacks and gives you enormous quantities of brain chemical at a reasonable price. I've been putting this off for a while. Since it's impossible to really understand the story's events without the spoiler stuff, I'm just gonna launch in with the endgame reveals. So if you don't want to see that, please exit the video. Now, if you'd please open your textbook to page 1. The events of Xenoblade 3 happen explicitly because the 2 worlds that Klaus created by being stupid are about to collide. The effective matriarchs of those 2 realities, Melia and Nia, somehow find the means to communicate across dimensions via light. Okay. Due to some non-existent rule of astrophysics, aka source my ass, they could break through the 4th dimension to speak. Apparently, they set in motion a plan to codify all data in this light, and if the realities collide, the arc containing the data would effectively reboot the realities to their original states. See, this is what I'm talking about. Everything I just said is gobbledygook, but also it's true. Now this is important. The hesitancy of the rulers and all this collected human data in the arc was so powerful that it created a new kind of energy. This created a being called Z, a sort of god willed into existence by collective wishes. So the final boss of Final Fantasy Tactics Advance, being born of real human fears, he wants to build an endless now, a world forever frozen, stagnant but secure. And he doesn't freeze time ever again. That would have smoked the party later. Hate to see it. Z went to work rebuilding reality, but he could only build with what data was contained in the arc known as Origin. That's why everything in-game looks familiar, why the species are all the same. It's basically a series of repurposed ideas from previous games. See, I told you it was important! Z needs a few things to maintain this reality. Firstly, the flame clocks to keep life fueled by a cycle of perpetual violence. Short, barbaric, low education, and impossible to escape. Overseers even contributed the ether energy back into the cycle for him. He also needed the queens of either reality, so Nia and Melia, who wouldn't cooperate, leading him to make replicas, figureheads for the states that would inspire a kind of patriotism and servility. And lastly, a loyal military who would regulate his vision in the field. The Mobius, or consuls, petty lords who ruled over a given colony, second only to their respective queens symbolically, and Z in reality. The Mobius can siphon flame clock energy to empower themselves, and manipulate soldiers, making them see the party as monsters, for example. Mobius live outside the rules of the flame clock, but if they die for real. So to recap, Z created a stagnant reality wherein the lowest class of people are thrust into a cycle of endless war and strife with minimal education and whose lives are often cut short with no opportunities to grow. They're presided over by cruel taskmasters that literally use them as fuel, and the fundamental rules of regular human life don't apply to them. And all of this is watched over by a puppet figurehead the people are meant to love. But society itself is actually controlled by a very intricate, planned stagnation, so nothing progresses, while the person most capable of enacting change simply won't, too limited to meaningfully create and too disaffected to feel compelled otherwise. A passive member of the audience, a monument to waste. This is about the real world, isn't it? This is just an explicit critique of the ways our systems have ultimately enabled a wealth class of tax-sheltering goons to ferret away ridiculous, actually immoral sums of money with governments broadly in the pocket thanks to the lobby and other kinds of corruption and coercion, while the people who actually make up the broader society are too strapped for time and energy to fight back, and massively propagandized into thinking all of this is somehow normal. I am gonna scream. What else do you call it? It's peak. It's art. It's just says it all plain. Wow! But you gotta get to the ending to piece all of that together. Other little plot devices inform the events as well. Purple fog, the same chaotic energy that Z builds beings from, occasionally floods an area, and after a time it can explode, causing an annihilation event, or just obfuscate the vision of Mobius, for example. A lot of little things are just annoying, like the stone that turned the party into Ouroboros can only turn a small number of people into Ouroboros at a time. So it's like the party literally walked directly into the Nia-created JRPG Party Maker stone, which feels like an ungodly clumsy justification, but fine. What else is fine? Riku just has the sword that's the only weapon capable of destroying the flame clocks. Fine. As for the events of the on-screen plot, I know, Jesus Christ. Early on, the party meets Ethel, a hero that Noah recognizes. She sees the party as monsters due to Mobius interference, but it's disrupted by the purple fog that rolls in. That's a lot of plot device interaction, but this scene is for Lance, Senna, Tyon, and Uni to learn how to interlink, and they do. Noah pulls out Lucky 7 and destroys the colony's flame clock, and that sets most of the game on a little roller coaster to break the clocks. During your adventures, Ethel and her rival Kamaravi duel to the death, mostly due to Mobius' influence again, but Kamaravi rips out his own eye, freeing himself of mind control, and the pair die doing what they loved most. Killing each other, I guess. And the Mobius here interlink to stop the party, but end up exploding from linking too long. We're shown a pair of deaths, one human and deliberate, versus an incidental set of deaths that arise from cruelty, foolishness, and desperation. It's an underwhelming boss death, but it lionizes the value of choosing how to live, of existing not only with conviction, but as conviction. These characters knew who they were and what they wanted to be. They lived that life. It encourages the party to live a life of meaning. Later on, the party destroys a gigantic cannon, literally a weapon of impression used by Mobius, and we confront N. I promise there's a reason for this. Also, the replica of Queen Melia, but ignore that. The humans we learned about very early on swoop in to take some human bodies contained in capsules, and this leads the party into discovering more about what life actually is. We're received pretty poorly by regular humans, viewed as thieves of opportunity to strike back at the Mobius. After all, for a band of humans who've only existed with hatred for their oppressors, we're nothing but posers. But we're the only Ouroboros around, so we're accepted in time. And not to interject or anything, but the party learns about and then it cuts to the beauty of life while every character on screen is thinking about I like to imagine the devs realized the scene could only happen with these characters who literally don't know how aging works, and they just snatched the opportunity, really plunged into it. A+. You're given a mission to rescue a comrade specifically because she can help with the quest. But after everything, a jailbreak, a whole ocean of content, this stupid pigtail idiot betrays you. This results in a confrontation between N and M, the two strongest Mobius. Hey, look over there real quick. More injection time! Noah and Mio are N and M, basically, just like any other life caught in the loop. They've lived past lives and been reborn many times. But long before the plot began, Mio married Noah and had a child together. But Mio's time ran out, and Noah couldn't take the pain. Z offered him a chance to join the Mobius Corps, and he did, but only because Z allowed Mio to join him. Hence, N and M. And the reason Noah and Mio exist in the main party is because N and M's souls split because the decision was so hard to make, it literally tore N in half. Mio as well, I guess. I'm not saying that's really extremely tacky. I'm saying it's like a big old band-aid. During the battle, M swaps consciousnesses with Mio, unbeknownst to N, and the party is captured and partially separated. N plans to send Mio off before killing Noah proper. Man, that prison scene hits different. On execution day, Mio's send-off day, N finally learns that he's actually sent his love off instead, which completely breaks him. Because it wasn't a trick. His own partner condemned herself to eternal death to escape him, or rather, what he became. Also, he gets blowed up by interlink form Lucky 7. The scene is obviously heavy in context. Stagnation can only foster so much love. N became a killer, a jailer, and an oppressor. It's a fitting name, N. Each Mobius reduced to a single letter. You can make lots of jokes about it. Watch out for the alphabet. Help, I'm being attacked by the alphabet mafia. Something tasteless or easy like that. It's the LGBTs. But they're reduced to a letter to signify the loss of their humanity. The traitor from earlier also tries to get a jab in, laughing as the secret human base is annihilated, only for Mio to Uno reverse her in real time, stating that she used M's powers from her Mobius body to warn and evacuate them long before the cannon was fired, which causes Shania to take her own life. Xenoblade 3 is more mature than the other games, or at least aspires to it. Characters swear, or would, but they were made, potentially by contract or for sales reasons, to keep profanity limited to in-universe slang. And that's unintentionally hilarious, especially out of these characters.
What the snuff is that? Barker. More snuffy in water. It is snuffy in water.
How did that get there? It's also kind of surprising to watch someone do this on screen. Xenoblade games are very much about will and hope, and in their total absence, with again no social safety net, no love, no forgiveness, we get this scene. We get a lot of the lore I outlined earlier when we meet with Nia, but we're also made to fight childhood friend Yorin. The runt, the person so twisted by being given the opportunity to view his past lives before becoming Mobius, seeing how much of a failure he always was, he manages to distort his friends in his own mind as just more people looking down on him. It's profoundly sad and something I struggle with myself if people actually like me or if it's disingenuous, whether people are talking to me for clout or from a place of interest, whether what I do is good enough at all. And it's reassuring that I'm playing this particular title, a game informed by mountains, actual mountains of conceptual work, going all the way back to like university philosophy material, and feeling like I can connect in a deeper way to the on-screen content. I think all that drapery and inlaid jewelry and linen and trim is beautiful and interesting to read about, but I didn't play, Kantian theory or whatever. I played Noah and Ko's adventure in finding meaning. That's why we made friends with Machina and rebuilt that city. That's why we made our own character and made lots of friends. That's why we sat around campfires, sharing little bits of ourselves and bonding. And that's why we're out here interlinking, kicking ass to make a better future. In-game anyway. Those will always be the important stories. So thank you, Nia, for your lore dump. It's very informative, but I got a game to beat. Nearing the final battle, you confront N one last time. Noah admits that he would have done the same for Mio. He doesn't blame N, but he's been given a chance that he won't squander, and he offers that chance to N. They fuse, and Noah's finally whole again. And in case you're 5 years old, Noah takes the time to explain that N is symbolic of regret, and he is symbolic of hope. Thank you. There's a big battle at the end. It's Xenoblade. We need the xenography, bro. You can't change the world unless it's being decimated by lasers and mechs. You just can't. Confronting Z is difficult. Genuinely, the battle is fittingly strenuous. Noah shatters the stage mid-battle. Nice little visual metaphor tie-in for a party changing the world and breaking up the endless drama of an undying existence. Maybe we all have a little Mobius inside of us. After destroying the living embodiment of late-stage capitalism, time's set to restart, which will set the worlds back and away with no real chance of collision for at least a millennium. Oh, there it is. There's the tears. It's been a while. Time resets and marches on, the journey reduced to a fleeting memory carried on the wind. There's a point where it stops being funny. I gave up cracking jokes in this vid so early on. I think it's pretty clear that Xenoblade struggles in the West. Sure, it's not dying out here, but weird Nintendo fans make a point of hating it out online alongside Fire Emblem all the time. I like to think those people haven't really engaged with the games. I mean, I barely have. A single play of each game, some research, and a script. It's kind of insane to handle media like that for one simple reason. Every one of these games told me to my face to get the fuck off the couch and talk to my friends, call my mother, appreciate my loved ones, breathe in nature, go out. But there I was, right? Stuck on a couch for 60 hours plus at a time, sinking the hours in and barely scraping by. And I'm still, right now, thinking, man, someone who is interested in me playing these is gonna hate this. Hate my coverage because it wasn't enough, or it was flippant, and you don't get to control that. If I've learned anything doing YouTube, you don't get to control how people react, no matter what you do. I like to think that everybody has worth, and I'm glad I got to play something with the same idea. Even the most obnoxious people can do valuable things. Even horrible people have an ounce of good. Even if they deserve annihilation and get it, the world is beautiful, and we matter to each other. The world seems pretty agnostic about us. Any kind of meaning is sketched from the portraits people create from you in their mind. Xenoblade presents a simulacrum of reality with makeup pre-applied. You're another animal on this earth, and when you die, you'll return. But you'll have the power to choose, with whatever wiggle room you have, to strike out and make something. Do something. Connect. Become. In that small, angry, flickering frame you've been cast in. Some people stumble for lack of help. Some manage entirely on their own for a while, and those who succeed draw others to them or fall in by chance, give and take in return. Carve something out of what you will with what you can. It's hard to take novel meaning from Xenoblade when it's channeling a lived reality. I've been there, and I'm going. All that counts now is knowing where and moving on. Let me take a second to thank some very particular individuals. First off, thank you to Mitch Kramer for helping me with the audio of this video. I would not have gotten this thing done in time if not for your help. And super special thanks to my collaborators, the 4 voiceover guests I had on this time, Zach Frazier, GC, Cullen, and King K, all of whom make YouTube videos. They're linked in the description. Check them out. And a triple special thanks to Cullen for providing me with 2 of the games here today. I don't have the words. I'm immortalizing this gift here now. Thank you. Hey, it's KBash. Huge thanks goes out to my $4 patrons. Check them out. Beautiful. And double special thanks goes to my extra generous patrons who are Adam Welch,
Acropolis,
42,
All Snaps,
Arch,
Arshwasser,
Azura,
Axinade,
Audra,
Bear Skeleton,
Basement Dweller,
Bearkeeper,
BZ Soul,
Ben M,
Bing
Bing Doodoo Oingo Boingo Time,
Blake Against the Machine,
Wargle Hargle,
Bohop,
Boom Days,
Brios, Brianna Wu, British Gooch,
Cal,
Can I Cuss on
Captain
Here?
Blasty,
Captain Wade,
C-Dub,
Caesar T,
Chiefy Boy,
Cordit,
Chris Bromo,
CLB 5000,
Cody Golden,
Couch Moba,
Corgi the Lad,
Crater, Chrono 19D,
CW Glassworks,
Cynical,
Daddy Dagon,
Dondium,
Danny Lavelle,
Denny Pangos,
Dakota Storm
Jakey
Jones,
Staggs, Swaggy
David
Beck,
Castillo,
Dara,
Dakota,
Dennis Amaya,
The Strega,
Diablo,
Dingusback,
Doug Prince,
Dr. Cullen PhD,
the protagonist,
Dylan Coffey,
8-Bit
The
Funk,
Elias,
Elpio,
Elsa,
Emperor Pickle,
Eric Monticello,
Aesthetico,
Everstone Isle,
Exa,
Gnar,
Fupa Saiyan,
Frankenstick,
Frisky Nippler,
Glitchseeker,
Nine Cat,
Goose,
6112,
Gray, the
darkest black,
Garcory,
Gucci Plant,
Asi Ibrahim Tanyurga,
Hatsune Miku's Crack House,
Archive,
Beeman, Game and Station,
X-Max,
Honey Mutts, Horn Tiger,
How do you know?
Huey. I'm supporting KBash just because I wanted to make this part of the video longer.
Ingenious Clown,
I punched a sandwich.
Irrational, Irradiated Cherries,
Dice Kyle.
It's not bad.
It's time to sue.
It's not good.
Ivy Ruth Langley,
Jacob,
James, Jason Lasky,
Jaden,
Jay
JK Hedgehog,
John Bo the Joker,
Joke Frog,
Jordan Joyner,
Jules DLC,
Julian My Julian,
KBash's Best K,
Keegan Too Cool,
Kata Snack,
King Kuma,
Keej,
Knight Pike,
Clock,
Kong 2020,
Crated,
Crazy Dark Chocolate,
Kumi,
Heist,
Kyle,
KZ Excellent,
Lady Dentalion,
Lady Weed,
Blade Tricks,
Laundry Mom,
Lego Sid,
Lethal Nibbles,
Little Big Trouble,
Loathsome Dung Eater,
Low Fat Mogul,
Lucas Boy, Lucky McSmucky, Mac James,
Lupin the Turd,
Magical Madman,
Mama Rollin,
Manapool,
Mara Ganger,
Hercules,
Mugio,
Maximilian Wolfgang Niver,
Maple Puppet,
Metal Gear Gaseous,
Michelle Citrano,
Mike DeVere,
Milky Moo Official,
Mikusagi,
Monochrome Only,
Modi,
Mr. Dodongo,
Mr. Whiskey 282,
Mr. Yeety Dabface McYoinkbomb,
Nairanu,
Nito Torpedo,
Nico Puzzle
Norian
Rat,
Daridius,
Not Nobel,
Nuggy,
Old Burgle, Old Man Cranberry,
Omni Nerd Zero,
Only LK,
The Plant,
Pandemic Cowboy,
Pinata,
PBK,
PK Gaming,
Pontus Reddin,
Popular Hitman,
Potato Gaming HD,
Prismatic Dan,
Fractal and Pals,
Quasar
McDougal,
Quillworth,
Quinn,
Radpunk,
Reasonable Willow,
Reggie Rodriguez,
Renteca Bond,
Ricochet
Framed
Frame,
Relay,
Roy Londo,
Ryan Maury Brooks,
Siren Smells Good,
Salty Smasher,
Scribe Slendy,
Say,
Sakai no Award,
Sexy
Bionicle GF,
Shot,
Shinigami,
Shut Up Wesley,
Silver Bear 909,
Sim
God,
Sleepy Wabbit,
Slick Tactics,
Sock'em Boppers,
Suckdolager,
Space Lizard,
Spooky Grimalkin,
Squidged,
Squishword,
Standard Issue Dingus,
Star Night Sky,
Storm Strider and the House of Storm,
Streetums,
Sublime Cataclysm,
Super
Sandwich Guy,
Harvold's Quest,
Shorn
Chubbington,
the Big Bubby, the Clown Prince of
the
Cringe,
Digital Dutchman,
The Good
Lord has blessed me, hallelujah,
the Green Loki,
the Peacemaker Pyro,
the Salt Knight,
the Dick Mystic,
Drips Heart,
Tiggles
McGuffin,
Tim Lobster,
Timid the Writer,
Turtle Play,
Travis Edwards,
Twiddle Chungus,
Ty Guy 9001,
Vid,
Valenris,
Venom,
Vice Pup, Viewers Like You,
Vic,
Waposa,
Weeb Trash,
Waylon,
Where am I? Help?
Widgie, Winter Solstice,
Wood TV,
Wrenchim, Zanny Tanner,
Yashichi,
Yate Kundo, Your Mom, Winky
Zachary Lives,
Zachary
Zanasso,
Zane the Impure,
Zane the Pure,
Zed Slayer Gamer,
Zero Zalazar,
Sylvan Ray,
Zenova,
Cyberbunk. If you'd like to help support the show, unlock new long-form projects, and help me keep improving, check out my Patreon. We got lots more videos in store. Stay tuned for more. KBash out.